Bran Stark sat in the Dragonette at King's Landing, his posture erect in the simple wooden chair that had been provided for him, the sun beating down mercilessly from a sky gone white with heat. Tyrion Lannister stood before the assembled lords and ladies, tall enough on that day of shifting power that his shoulders looked less burdened by the weight of the world. There had been talk, whispers at first, about who would rule once the forces of Daenerys Targaryen had disintegrated in the fires of madness, culminating with her death at the hands of Jon Snow. And after that, the realm looked at those who remained, the surviving heirs, the ones who had fought the War of the Five Kings, then the war against the dead, then against the final fury of Daenerys's dragons. The realm needed a ruler. Tyrion had given a long speech. He had praised the skill of the Unsullied, recognized the devotion of the Dothraki, and delivered eulogies for the thousands who had died. Then he had pivoted, shackles still on his wrists, to proclaim that the best person to lead them was none other than Brandon Stark, the boy who had traveled beyond the wall, who had become the three-eyed raven, who had seen what the rest of them could not. They looked at Bran with a mixture of reverence and wariness, for everyone knew the boy was strange now, haunted with visions. Yet at the same time, there was an eerie calm in him. The hush that fell across the dragon pit was nearly tangible. All eyes turned to Bran. Sansa, seated among them, turned her face to him, eyes bright with a new hope. Arya, still dusty from her travels, watched warily from the sidelines. Davos Seaworth cleared his throat once or twice, and somewhere, Brienne of Tarth allowed a rare flicker of emotion to slip across her face. Even the bitter, wounded Grey Worm, standing near the Unsullied, seemed to be evaluating whether the quiet boy in the chair was friend or foe. Bran, for a moment, was silent. Everyone expected him to say something along the lines of acceptance, for Tyrion's voice had rung with logic. Who better to usher in a new era than one who knew the mistakes of the past? Who better to guide them than the one who had become nearly omniscient, untethered from petty ambitions? But as the tension in the air built to a nearly audible pitch, Bran took in a breath. His eyes, which often seemed to stare through men rather than at them, settled on Tyrion for a heartbeat. Then he turned to scan the semicircle of lords, Edmure Tully of Riverrun, Yara Greyjoy of the Iron Islands, Gendry Baratheon legitimized in the Stormlands, Robin Arryn of the Vale, and beyond them the Northmen. Men who had fought under the Stark banners for generations. He closed his eyes. And when he opened them, they were sad. Tyrion gave a small tilt of his head as though urging the young Stark to speak. But the words that came from Bran's mouth were the last anyone expected. "I refuse," he said. It was spoken quietly, but in the hush of that place, the declaration rippled like thunder. Tyrion's face contorted with confusion, and his mouth opened, but he did not at once speak. It was Sansa who found her voice first, though she used it gently, as though speaking to a child who had lost his way. "Bran," she said, "we're offering you the kingship. The realm needs guidance. It needs someone with wisdom and the right intentions. You said you never wanted for anything anymore, that you lived mostly in the past. But," she swallowed, "you're the best choice. You know everything that's come before." Bran seemed to hesitate, as if measuring his sister's words, or perhaps sifting through visions in his mind. Then his fragile voice dropped again. "What I have seen, I cannot bear to sit the throne. I cannot be what you want me to be." He shook his head, and the gesture was neither the wise or cryptic motion of a green seer, nor the polite refusal of a lord. There was a brittleness in it. "I cannot rule, Sansa. That time and that role is not for me. I can't explain fully, but I'm sorry." Whispers began in waves. Edmure Tully looked perplexed. Gendry Baratheon ran a hand through the sweat on his brow. Yara Greyjoy folded her arms, her jaw set. Arya watched with her lips parted, as if ready to intervene or to defend him. Jon Snow, standing slightly behind the lords, gazed at Bran with an equal mix of confusion and pity. It fell upon Tyrion once more to speak, and this time, the man's voice was slower, more uncertain. "Bran, my lord, you must realize what's at stake. This is the moment for which we've all fought and bled. If not you, then who? You have the knowledge that can guide this realm away from our ancestors' mistakes. You understand the future better than any of us." Bran's gaze flickered. Something passed across his face, like a distant memory. He peered through the courtyard, seeing beyond it. "I do. I understand what might happen should I become king. And it is not a future I think the realm deserves. Things have changed. I have changed. I'm sorry, but my answer is no. The silence that followed was deeper than any that had come before. Sansa's cheeks reddened with confusion and anger. Davos shifted on his feet. A seagull swooped overhead, cawing in the stifling heat. Tyrion exhaled, a long, weary sigh, and in that sigh he seemed to deflate. "Well," he said at last, his shoulders slumping, "then we must find another." It was in that moment that the path diverged. Bran Stark's refusal would reshape the realm in ways both subtle and gross, forging a new destiny for everyone present and for the Seven Kingdoms themselves. If the boy who had seen all would not guide them, who would step forward into the breach? No one answered at once, for shock rippled through them like a tremor of the earth. Instead, an uncertain hush descended. In that hush, each began to realize that the future, the one Tyrion had tried to foist upon them, the one most had been prepared to accept, had vanished like morning mist. Bran felt, with the heaviness of sorrow, that a moment had passed in which he might have chosen an easier road. The near omniscience that had come upon him, unasked, had shown him glimpses of all possible endings. And so many times he had seen himself with a crown, the lords of Westeros bowing to him in grudging respect, and an uneasy peace settling over the land. But in that vision he was not himself. He had been something else, a husk, a vessel for knowledge. And knowledge alone was too cold a thing to rule the realm. Something inside him, something that might once have been called Brandon Stark of Winterfell, had recoiled. In a single moment, he had realized that he did not want it, that it would break him beyond repair. And so he refused. Yet refusing was not a neat conclusion. It was only the beginning. At last, Robin Arryn coughed and stood, shaky in his posture but resolute. He cast a glance around at the others. "If we cannot have Bran, who, then, will lead us?" Sansa drew herself up, turning so the crowd would see her face. Her red hair, once so bright in childhood, was darkened by the dust of the battlefield that still clung to many of them, even here in the capital. She glanced to her brother, then the others. "The North knows no king but the king in the North," she said slowly. "I had already half a mind to proclaim our independence, but Tyrion's suggestion offered hope for a realm that would not tear itself apart. If Bran won't take it, then do we continue as we always have? A king on the Iron Throne, and the North resentful." That statement made Grey Worm shift. He remembered, perhaps, that the Unsullied still held King's Landing as an occupying force, that Daenerys's legacy, even in tatters, had left the city in ruins. Tyrion pressed his lips together, and at last he turned. "If the North wants its independence, might others demand the same? Where does that leave us, if we are no longer the Seven Kingdoms?" Yara Greyjoy shrugged, as though the notion intrigued her. "The Iron Islands have often yearned for independence," she said. "We wanted it under Balon. We only bent the knee because Daenerys demanded it. Now that she's gone, maybe we follow the North's example. Maybe we break away. Why should we not? Our people have never thrived under the Iron Throne's taxes and codes." At that, Edmure Tully lifted his voice. "The Riverlands are tired of being caught in every crossfire. We have lost too many men in these wars. But we have no deep desire to stand alone. Without the Crown's protection, the Riverlands lie open to aggression from east or west. I would prefer a strong king who unites us all." "You speak of a strong king," Gendry Baratheon said, still marveling that he was included in this circle after a life as a bastard blacksmith. "But we've had strong kings and we've had mad ones. Good men and monsters. The monarchy itself is a gamble. Why not something else?" Davos, who had stayed quiet, cleared his throat. "Begging your pardons, it feels like we're walking in circles, discussing independence, monarchy, or something else. But I still think we need a single voice to lead us, or all we've done so far will be undone the moment we leave this pit. The Game of Thrones continues whether we want it or not. The question is, who's fit for it?" In the corner, the faintest twitch of a smile curved Arya's lips. She'd always despised the game, the notion that these lords and ladies could decide the fates of thousands in an afternoon's conversation. She glanced at Bran, whose head was bowed, as though in regret or introspection. She looked at Sansa, who stood tall and proud, too wise to be manipulated as she once had been. Then her gaze flicked over Jon Snow, who had not yet spoken. Jon had eyes filled with guilt and heartbreak after what he had done to Daenerys. She read in his posture an absolute refusal to claim the throne. He wanted nothing more of politics. He was haunted by the necessity of his act. Then, unbidden, the silence was broken by Tyrion. The Lannister turned slowly to fix his gaze upon Sansa. His voice was quiet. "You, Lady of Winterfell, you have outplayed lords far older than you. You survived the cruelty of King Joffrey, you survived the snares of Littlefinger, you fought for the North and for your family. The people trust you. Would you take the throne if Bran will not?" Sansa blinked. She swallowed. But before she could speak, Arya shook her head, stepping forward. "She's the Lady of Winterfell. We want the North's independence, do we not?" Sansa lifted her chin. "We do. But if I must choose between watchful independence and the risk that the realm falls apart, I know what I would do." She closed her eyes briefly. "The North has lost too many. Another war might break us. But if the realm can be led by a Stark, perhaps that is the best we can hope for. At least then we can ensure a just rule." There was a tension that coiled in the pit of Arya's stomach. She remembered the men who had come for them time and again. She remembered betrayal. She remembered that of the Starks, Sansa was indeed cunning enough to navigate these waters. But it filled Arya with unease. She saw a flicker in Bran's vacant gaze, a silent warning. Yet he said nothing. Tyrion breathed, "Then perhaps you should be queen, Lady Sansa." And in that moment, as the silence thickened and all eyes turned to Sansa, Bran spoke at last. "No," he said, not in a tone of condemnation but with quiet firmness. "Sansa's path is different. She will rise high, that much is certain. But not this way." He turned his head so that his gaze locked with his sister's. "Do you truly want this? Have you seen all the cost? I can see glimpses of what it would demand of you. The ambition, it will burn you. And you will not be a queen of joy." He paused, voice trembling on a knife point of prophecy. "Let me spare you that. If you desire the throne, it must be truly your will, knowing what burdens come." A hush fell. Sansa's expression hardened. "If it means protecting the North, I will do it," she said. "But I do not claim to be the realm's best choice. Nor do I crave power in the manner of Cersei or Daenerys." "You're the best choice here," Robin Arryn said. "Edmure Tully is." "Edmure Tully." A little laugh rippled among those who had seen Edmure's attempt to posture earlier. "Gendry is new to the nobility. Yara, well, the Ironborn rarely want anything to do with the rest of us. Our only other candidate was Bran, and he refuses. So if not you, then who else?" Sansa hesitated again, scanning each of the lords. Jon made no move, he was determined to fade into the background. Tyrion, in chains, stood pinned by the eyes of Grey Worm, who clearly cared nothing for these discussions except to see justice done for Daenerys. Arya refused any notion that she might rule. Ser Brienne could not, she was no heir of a great house. Ser Davos was no noble at all. The swirl of tension threatened to collapse upon Sansa's shoulders. But Bran interjected, this time addressing the entire assembly. "I do not want it, but I will help you choose." His voice had a fragile strength, as though he was calling upon whatever green seer magic he still fully possessed. "I cannot force anyone upon that seat, but I can warn you of a future soaked in further blood." His gaze traveled around the circle. "Whatever we do, we must do it together." In that moment, for reasons he did not fully know, Tyrion turned to Jon Snow. "What about him? He has Targaryen blood as well as Stark. He was the hero of the North. A man who does not want the throne is, in many ways, the best person to take it." "No," Jon said with quiet finality. "I did what I did to Daenerys because there was no other way. I can't lead the realm. Not after what happened. The people would never accept me, half of them would despise me as a queenslayer. The North already rallied behind me once. And I couldn't hold them all. Please. I have no taste for it." And so the conversation came to revolve around Sansa once more and the question of letting the Seven Kingdoms break apart. The minutes bled into hours. Eyes darted from one person to the next, each remembering the death that had soaked the city, the rubble that still lay outside these walls. Many recognized that a war for independence would cost thousands of more lives. Sansa found her lips pressing into a tight line, her sense of duty warring with her sense of northern pride. She felt Arya's gaze on her, as though cautioning her not to give away the freedom they had bled to secure. Yet Sansa also saw the small folk in her mind's eye, those who needed stability. And so, at last, she made her choice. She rose with quiet dignity. "If my brother Bran refuses this crown, then I will accept it," she said. "But as queen in the North, first and foremost. If the rest of the realm wishes to name me as queen of the Seven Kingdoms, or what remains of them, I will lead." but the north shall be free. I'll offer my hand in alliance to the other lords. Govern your own lands as you see fit under the banner of unity, but let the north stand as its own. And let the others choose whether to remain loyal to the crown or stand independent. She took a breath. If this arrangement is acceptable, I will do my best to keep peace in the realm. Arya's brows knitted, but she did not interrupt. In fact, if you did. The lords glanced around uneasily, for what did it mean to have a queen who claimed the North's freedom first? But many recognized that if each region demanded full independence, the realm would fracture at once. Sansa's proposal offered at least a semblance of compromise. She would hold the seat as queen, commanding loyalty from those who wished to remain in the fold, but no region would be forced to comply. If Yara declared the Iron Islands free, so be it. If the Vale wanted to remain with the queen, they could. The monarchy would exist as an alliance, not a chain. At length, Tyrion gave a sad smile. We are living in strange times indeed, he said. Yet perhaps a new model is what we need. Will you accept the other lords as your vassals, Queen Sansa, if they so choose? Will you defend them as a friend, not an overlord? Sansa nodded, though her heart pounded. I will. The North has always known hardship. We know how precious alliances can be. If other houses wish to follow me, I'll not betray them. One by one, the lords of Westeros made their choices, mindful that the city around them still needed rebuilding, mindful that winter might ravage the land soon. The Vale pledged allegiance, for Sansa was of their blood through her mother, and Robin Arryn saw little benefit in standing alone. The Riverlands, through Edmure Tully, also pledged fealty. Dorne, battered though it was, chose a separate path, intending to remain largely independent, as it often had in centuries past. The Stormlands, through Gendry Baratheon, decided to follow Sansa on condition of mutual respect. The Westerlands, now leaderless with Cersei and Jaime both dead, stood uncertain until Tyrion made a wry suggestion that the seat might pass to someone deserving, though he insisted he was not that man. Eventually, the lords resolved that Tyrion could be a regent for the Westerlands, at least for now, if the new queen so approved. Unconventionally, she did, in part as a gesture of reconciliation. Tyrion was still in chains, but Sansa had them taken off. She reminded everyone that the wars must end and that someone with experience was needed to help rebuild. Tyrion, for his part, accepted humbly, aware that the Unsullied might never forgive him. That Grey Worm watched him with silent fury. The Iron Islands also chose independence. Yara had no desire to kneel again, not after everything, and Sansa did not contest the matter so long as Yara promised not to raid the North's coasts. They shook hands on it, and that fragile peace was sealed. Lastly, the Crownlands themselves, battered and nearly destroyed, needed leadership more than ever. And so, by that strange arrangement, Sansa Stark ascended as Queen of the Realms that chose her, an alliance of the North, the Vale, the Riverlands, the Stormlands, and the Westerlands, and she would do her best to lead them in a new age. It was, by no means, a smooth or universally accepted arrangement, but it was enough to avert outright chaos. The Unsullied and the Dothraki, many of whom had lost hope after Daenerys' death, chose to depart across the sea or to find other lands for themselves, no longer bound to fight in a foreign war. Grey Worm's glare at Jon Snow burned, but he accepted Sansa's offer of safe passage if he and his men wished to leave. For him, there was little left in Westeros worth defending. And throughout all of this, Bran Stark remained quiet in his wooden chair, as though watching a tapestry of time unfold. The realm had a queen, albeit under conditions that might lead to further fracturing. A new era had begun, but no one knew how it would end. When the meeting finally concluded and the lords began to disperse in weary clusters, Sansa approached Bran. The lines of worry on her face were unmistakable. "Why did you refuse?" she asked. Tyrion was right. "You know more than any of us. You could have avoided so many mistakes." Bran's gaze lifted, distant as ever. "Knowledge is not always enough," he said. "I have seen visions of myself on that throne, Sansa. I have felt what it would do to me. I cannot shape the realm's destiny when I am barely a person anymore. What I've become is not a king. The best I can do is advise if you wish it." A flicker of relief lit Sansa's eyes. She took her brother's hand. It felt cold to the touch. "I do wish it, and I will need your advice more than ever. Please come back to Winterfell with me." But Bran shook his head. "For now, I must remain in the capital. I have something I must do here. I cannot explain it in full. But the remnants of the past are strong in this place, and I can sense forces stirring. Let me help you, but in my own way." Sansa didn't fully understand, but she nodded. She had seen enough of his abilities to know that Brandon Stark existed in multiple layers of time. She found a scrap of comfort that at least she would not shoulder her burdens without the counsel of her wise, if strange, brother. Arya joined them, her expression guarded, and asked if Bran truly was certain. He nodded once, and that was that. As Sansa was escorted away by lords who needed decisions made, Arya lingered with Bran. The breeze that swept through the dragon pit was warm and acrid, carrying the scent of ashes. "You did not want the throne," Arya said. "I'm relieved. I always thought what you are now shouldn't be caged by that." Bran turned his head. A faint smile touched his lips. "Thank you, Arya. I am still your brother in some sense." A hesitation. "But in many other senses I am different. I see many paths. The one in which I rule is dire. I think, for now, Sansa is a better path." Arya nodded, letting the tension in her shoulders ease, just a little. "So what will you do now?" "Sit here and brood on the secrets of the city." "There is something I must find," Bran said cryptically. "Something in the heart of King's Landing, in the memories of this place. Not all secrets died with Daenerys. This city is old, and beneath it lie catacombs and vaults that even the Targaryens feared. I've glimpsed them in my visions, but I need to see them more clearly." Arya's eyes narrowed. "That sounds dangerous." "It might be," Bran admitted. "But knowledge is what I have to offer. If I can glean something from the remains of the Red Keep, from the ruins left by the dragons, it may help Sansa, or it may help us all." Arya considered for a moment. Her curiosity, the restless spirit that had carried her across the seas and back, piqued at the thought of secrets beneath the keep. "I could go with you," she offered. But Bran shook his head. "You have your own journey, sister. I saw you on a ship once, sailing west of Westeros. That is your calling." He paused, voice turning gentle. "Don't let me anchor you. You've never been one to stay in one place, have you?" Arya paused, hearing echoes of her conversation with the Hound, with Jaqen Hagar, with all the shapes she had worn, all the faces. She realized then that her soul did yearn for some place beyond the horizon. "No," she said finally. "I never have. But I don't like leaving you to wander alone." "I won't be alone," Bran said. And in his gaze was something that looked almost like a wry amusement, as though invisible spirits or ravens might accompany him. "Go, Arya. Find what's beyond the maps. Sansa will be queen and rule. Jon will find his way, too, in time." At the mention of Jon, Arya glanced across the courtyard, where Jon stood alone, eyes downcast. She knew he was likely bound for the Wall again, or perhaps even beyond it, to find some semblance of redemption for what he had done. Wordlessly, she hugged Bran, feeling that fragile frame in her arms, and then she let him go, stepping away. The day was bright, but a gloom still clung to the remains of King's Landing. In the days that followed, the realm saw a quiet revolution. Sansa Stark was crowned in the Red Keep's throne room, though less than half the pillars and walls remained unbroken. She insisted the ceremony be brief and modest, wearing a simple circlet of silver shaped like wolves' heads entwined. The common folk, exhausted by war, had little energy for pageantry. Many only prayed that the bloodshed would at last cease. Yet even in that battered city, some sense of hope was ignited. Sansa proved efficient, calling upon Tyrion to oversee rebuilding efforts, encouraging Davos to organize shipments of food from the Stormlands to the starving people in the Crownlands. She offered leniency and fair judgment, punishing only those crimes that could be proven. She insisted on forging ties with Dorne, even if they wished to remain separate. She wrote letters to Yara Greyjoy, affirming their uneasy truce. And for the first time, the Iron Throne itself, which had melted into slag beneath Drogon's wrath, was replaced by a simpler seat of carved weirwood brought down from the north, polished and shaped to resemble curling branches. Sansa sometimes eyed it with unease. Her name might be revered or spat upon in the days to come, depending on the choices she made. But she would do her duty. Bran kept to the shadows, neither a lord nor a king. No, he was something else, robed in plain dark garb, wheeling himself about the corridors that had not collapsed. Those who saw him might wonder if he was an otherworldly spirit, the ghost of a young Stark haunting the halls. Sometimes he was accompanied by Podrick Payne, who had once been Brienne's squire. Sansa entrusted Podrick to watch over Bran to ensure he did not come to harm. And so Pod followed him dutifully, if somewhat perplexed as to what the boy was doing. Bran would ask for assistance traversing the subterranean passages under the keep, rummaging through collapsed tunnels, peering into the darkness where the glow of a single torch barely reached. On more than one occasion, they returned to the surface with soot on their faces and sweat on their brows, having found nothing but ancient rubble. But Bran was persistent. Meanwhile, the city was forced to confront its new reality. Grey Worm and the Unsullied prepared to leave for Noth to honor Missandei's memory, leaving behind a skeleton garrison of Unsullied who either had no desire to return or had formed attachments in Westeros. The Dothraki, what remained of them, scattered to the countryside or found passage across the seas. Jon Snow, after a tearful conversation with Sansa, who offered to pardon him of everything, chose exile of his own. "I cannot remain here," he told her. "I loved her. I killed her. The realm is better off without me. I'll go north to the Wall and beyond if they'll have me." Sansa did not have the heart to forbid him. She wept, but she let him go, for he was beyond her power in that regard. He left quietly with only a handful of loyal men who still called themselves his friends. As for Arya, she gathered supplies for a sea voyage, booking passage on a ship heading west. She lingered just long enough to see Sansa crowned, to exchange a few final words with Jon, and to share a silent farewell with Bran, who told her, "The world is wider than we know." She went, carrying Needle at her hip, determined to discover the edges of the map and see what was beyond. So it was that the city, bereft of Targaryens, Lannisters, and most of the old powers, found itself helmed by a northern queen who, ironically, had claimed independence for her own land but had inherited a fractured realm. Some lords grumbled. Some hailed her as a welcome change. Few had the energy for more bloodshed. And in that uncertain calm, winter winds began to blow in from the north, stirring the ashes still piled high in the streets. People whispered of the struggles still to come, harvests that might fail, bandits roving the war-torn roads. But for now, the bells of the city rang, not in mourning but in a shaky acknowledgement that perhaps peace had come. Each evening, when Sansa dismissed her counselors and walked through the scorched courtyard of the Red Keep, she would find Bran in his chair, gazing at the distant remnants of the city walls. Occasionally, he would speak to her. Other times, he seemed far away, lost in visions. She came to rely on his cryptic counsel more than she expected. He foresaw minor crises, conflicts among the lords, shifts in the weather. Sometimes his half-spoken warnings helped Sansa redirect shipments of grain or provide extra watch on certain roads. She did not understand how he knew. She accepted it. Still, it unsettled her. She saw how on his face had become, how he sometimes went days without seeming to sleep. She feared the knowledge within him was like a great, monstrous beast devouring him from the inside. But whenever she tried to question him, he would only say, "This is what I must do." Weeks passed. The capital's repairs began in earnest. Tyrion proved invaluable in managing finances, though Sansa had to carefully keep watch over him. She recognized that in the past, his cunning had gotten him and others into trouble, but she also saw that he was sincerely bent on making amends. Sansa formed her small council. Brienne of Tarth took the role of Lord Commander of the Queen's Guard. She accepted only reluctantly, for she had never sought glory, but her devotion to the Stark girls won out. Davos served as Master of Ships, a post that he was ill at ease with given the battered navy. But he did his best. Gendry was invited to serve as Master of War, training new recruits to replace the thousands lost. And so, piece by piece, the city took shape. One moonlit night, Sansa found herself summoned by Podrick. "Your Grace," he said, breathing heavily. "It's about Lord Bran. Pardon me, I don't know his proper title. He's gone down into the lower vaults again. He asked me to wait outside. I heard something. It sounded like stones scraping. I'm worried for him." Sansa, alarmed, took a lantern and followed Podrick to the door that led beneath the keep, behind twisted corridors of blackened walls. The door was half-rotten, battered open long ago by the collapse of certain tunnels. The acrid stench of stagnant water filled their nostrils. They descended flights of steps, each deeper than the last, each darker. The flicker of the lantern illuminated a cramped path strewn with rubble. The echoes of dripping water reverberated. And as they moved deeper, Sansa felt a flicker of dread. She had not been down here since she was a child, nor had anyone else for many years. These vaults had been sealed. Some said they contained old caches of wildfire from the days of the Mad King. Others rumored hidden crypts. Jaime Lannister once spoke of them when he had threatened to blow up the city. "Bran!" Sansa called, voice hushed. She heard no reply, only the faint echo of water. They pressed on. Podrick carefully used the tip of his sword to clear debris from their path. Torchlight revealed passages that might once have connected to the dungeons, or to the Targaryen-era cellars. They came upon a partially collapsed archway, beyond which yawned a black corridor. Somewhere in the dark, they heard the soft echo of Bran's voice. Sansa's heart lurched. She forced her way through, stooping, crumbling bits of stone scraping at her gown. Podrick held the lantern aloft, and there Bran sat in his wheeled chair, facing a portion of wall that had collapsed. Moonlight filtered through a crevice overhead, casting ghostly beams on the rubble. He appeared completely unconcerned by their approach, as though he had known they would come. "Sansa," Bran said softly as they drew near. "You found me." She glanced around. "What are you doing down here? This place could collapse any moment." "I needed to see," he said, and his hand rose, trembling, to point at the collapsed stone. "Here." Sansa and Podrick lifted the lantern, revealing the partial remains of what looked like a mosaic or a sigil etched into the wall. It was chipped, half buried in fallen rocks. She couldn't quite make out the design. It seemed to be a swirl of shapes, with lines radiating outward. In the gloom, it almost looked reminiscent of the patterns the White Walkers had once left behind. Sansa felt a chill. "What is it?" she asked. Bran's eyes stared, wide and distant. "A memory. Perhaps older than even the Targaryens. Something the First Men left, or perhaps something from the Children of the Forest. All I know is that I was drawn here. There's power in old places, Sansa. Power that might be awakened or harnessed. The dragons were not the first to inhabit these lands. We forget that King's Landing once belonged to others, that the keep was built upon older foundations. And here is a fragment of that older design." Sansa moved closer, feeling uneasy. The swirl pattern indeed reminded her of those arcs of corpses the White Walkers had arranged beyond the wall. The memory made her skin prickle with dread. What do you hope to find?" Bran's expression flickered with sorrow. "A warning. The Night King was defeated, but the forces that shaped him remain in the weft of the world. Dark magic older than the wall, older than the Undals. I've seen glimpses of it in my dreams. I sense it stirring here, in the heart of the realm. A festering wound left by the wars, by Daenerys's fire, by centuries of intrigue. We are not as safe as we believe." Sansa swallowed, trying to steady herself. "We must rebuild, not chase ghosts in the dark. The White Walkers were vanquished." She clutched at a measure of composure. "Are you sure you're not seeing shadows that no longer exist?" Bran's gaze rose, meeting hers. "It exists. Maybe not as it once did. But the essence of that threat, the hatred, the darkness, can be reborn. War and strife give it shape. That's why I had to refuse the throne. If I had taken it, I would have been blind to this. I would have spent my days in the seat of power while this darkness grew in the corners of the realm. But now I can root it out, or at least watch it." A tremor ran through Sansa. She still remembered the cold terror of the long night, the undead armies. She lowered her voice, forcing calm. "What do we do?" "Let me delve deeper," Bran said. "I might be able to cast my sight back, see how this place was formed, who carved these signs, whether there's a deeper network of caverns. If a shadow stirs, forewarned is forearmed. I want you to keep the realm united as best you can. War and chaos only feed that darkness." She hesitated, then nodded. "All right, but be careful, Bran." She stepped forward, pressing her hand over his. "I couldn't bear to lose you." He smiled faintly. "You won't. I'm already mostly gone, I fear. But let me do what I can to protect what remains of our family of the realm." Sansa's eyes misted. She recalled the sweet boy who had once climbed the walls of Winterfell. Now he was this. A living library of visions, sacrificing the last vestiges of normal life to some intangible threat. She motioned to Podrick. "Help me bring him upstairs. This place is cold and damp. He can continue his research in the library or with maps. We'll send men to clear the rubble more safely." Podrick nodded. Bran did not protest. As they let him out, the swirl pattern remained behind, half lit by moonlight, half buried. It felt to Sansa like the eye of a watcher from another age, glaring out from the dark. Back above ground, Sansa arranged for a small contingent of laborers to begin clearing the old vault, hoping that more of the city's secrets might be uncovered in a controlled way. With winter nipping at their heels, the laborers had precious little time, but at the Queen's command, they obeyed. In the days that followed, rumors spread that Queen Sansa was dabbling in old magic, that she kept a strange brother with powers of prophecy locked in the keep. Some said it was an ill omen, others that it was a sign of divine favor. Sansa tried to quell such talk by remaining pragmatic, focusing on rebuilding roads and dwellings. She traveled briefly to the Riverlands, conferring with Edmure about distribution of grain, mindful that the small folk would starve if not properly provisioned. She gave orders for fortifications to be repaired in the Westerlands, anticipating that bandits might try to capitalize on the fractured realm. Gradually, a sense of normalcy returned to portions of the kingdom, though in truth it was a quiet, desperate normalcy overshadowed by uncertainty. And all the while, Bran's search went on deeper than any had guessed. He spent hours alone in his chamber, eyes rolled back in his head, warding into flocks of ravens that circled the wreckage of the city, or diving into the memories of weirwood trees around the land. Sometimes Sansa would find him trembling, sweat beading on his brow as though wrestling with nightmares. She feared for him, but she also saw how invaluable his warnings could be. She averted a potential riot in Flea Bottom after one of his visions showed her the tinderbox of hunger lurking there. She thwarted a band of mercenaries in the Stormlands seeking to carve out their own petty kingdom. Each time, she was left wondering how exactly he had known. He gave half-answers, lost in cryptic riddles, as though the strain of seeing so much had corroded his ability to speak plainly. Yet Sansa was grateful. Her rule was precarious, but with Bran's help she navigated the crises. People began to call her the Wolf Queen, a mixture of awe and wariness clinging to the moniker. Some said she was ruthless, others claimed she was merciful. She had, after all, pardoned several figures who had once aligned with Cersei or Daenerys, provided they swore new oaths of loyalty and contributed to rebuilding. She struck at banditry decisively, however, dispatching the reformed City Watch to quell uprisings. By the time the first snows of winter descended upon King's Landing, the city was no longer in outright ruins, broken, yes, but beginning to mend. Smoke rose from new chimneys, markets reopened. The scalding heat of summer had passed, replaced by the crisp chill that reminded everyone of the war that had almost consumed the world. But the people endured. Then, one dawn, a rider came from the Vale, dusted with frost, bearing urgent tidings. He was admitted to the royal presence at once. In the throne room, where Sansa sat upon the carved weirwood seat, he bowed, face ashen. "My queen," he said, his breath fogging in the cold air. "A new threat has emerged in the mountains beyond the Vale. Outlaws, or so we thought. But there are tales of strange happenings. Entire villages deserted, no sign of struggle except the windings. Markings on walls, twisted shapes in the snow." His voice faltered, eyes wide with fear. "It's said that men hear whispers in the night, see shadows dancing on the slopes. The lords of the Vale are anxious, my queen. We beg your aid." A hush descended upon the throne room. Sansa's heart pounded, remembering the swirl patterns beneath the keep. She glanced at Tyrion, who frowned, and at Brienne, who maintained a stern composure. Could these be simple bandits, using superstition to keep villagers away from their hideouts? Sansa asked, trying to remain rational. "Perhaps," the messenger said, voice shaking. "But the Lord of the Vale believes otherwise. Some men who fled returned with wild stories of shapes carved into the walls of caves, blood-smeared altars. They said it was not men who did it, but something else. They beg you to come or to send men to see for yourself." The Wolf Queen did not dismiss him. She remembered Bran's warnings of old powers stirring, a residue of the dark magic that had once shaped the White Walkers. She realized that ignoring such rumors could be perilous. Without hesitation, she summoned her small council. Tyrion, Brienne, Davos, Gendry, and, at last, Bran, who arrived in his wheeled chair, face pale as bone. She had the messenger repeat his story. When he finished, Sansa asked Bran for his counsel. Bran closed his eyes, and for a moment it looked as though he might slip into one of his half-trances. Then he opened them, bleak and worried. "It's as I feared. The darkness that shaped the Night King, it's not gone. When the White Walkers fell, that power seeped back into the land, searching for cracks in the world. Now it's found a foothold in the mountains. It draws restless spirits, mortal or otherwise, twisting them." Tyrion exhaled softly. "Is it truly an existential threat? We have so little manpower left to spare. If we ignore it," Bran said, "it will grow. Men will die or vanish, fueling the darkness. Then it may spread, taking root in the hearts of the weak. Another great war could arise from this." Sansa's blood ran cold. She remembered all the times warnings had been ignored, stories of White Walkers dismissed as superstition. She resolved not to make the same mistake. "Then we face it," she said. "We do not let it grow. We can rally troops from the Vale and the Riverlands, perhaps. Gendry, will your men be able to ride in winter conditions?" Gendry nodded determinedly. "We'll find a way. The roads are passable still." She looked at Brienne. "I want you to lead a small expedition to confirm what is happening. Take a mix of Vale Knights and some Crownland soldiers. Bran." She turned to him. "I would ask you to remain here, safe, but you may be the only one who can truly identify this threat. Would you go with them?" Bran surprised her by nodding at once. "I will. I must see it for myself, see if we can stop it. There may be a way to quell the magic before it grows unstoppable. Brienne, fierce and protective, looked uncertain. With respect, Your Grace, taking Bran into potential danger is risky. Sansa's jaw set. She did not want her brother harmed. But she could not ignore that he possessed knowledge no one else did. Ensure he is guarded. Podrick will go with you as well, I assume. Gendry, can you spare men you trust? Gendry agreed. Davos offered to coordinate supplies. Tyrion, for once, had no flippant remark. He only looked worried, as though the specter of an unknown threat unsettled him more than open war. Within a fortnight, the expedition was prepared. Brienne led a column of knights clad in partial winter gear, chainmail beneath thick cloaks. Gendry had a small detachment of disciplined men from the Stormlands, ready for tough conditions. They set out from King's Landing on half-frozen roads. Bran traveled in a specially fitted wagon that Podrick and a few other loyal men carefully guided. As they passed through the city gates, a hush fell over onlookers. The sight of the crippled Stark boy, pale and distant, once rumored to be the prospective king, now heading north to confront an unnamed darkness, sent shivers through even the bravest hearts. Sansa watched them go, her breath steaming in the cold air. She felt a gnawing anxiety. She wanted to ride out with them, but she knew her duty was here, to maintain the tenuous stability of the realm. She stood on the ramparts until the last soldier vanished into the distance, the sun a cold gleam overhead. The journey north was grueling. Patches of ice slicked the King's Road, and nights grew bitter. They pressed on to the Vale, climbing mountain passes that tested the men's endurance. Bran spent much of the journey silent, as though half-warging into ravens that soared overhead, scouting the route. Occasionally he murmured warnings to Brienne, about an avalanche, a hidden crevasse, a band of desperate outlaws. Each time, she adjusted their course accordingly, marveling at his foresight. Word spread among the soldiers that the quiet boy in the wagon saw with more than his eyes. Some were awed, others spooked. At last, they reached the Eyrie, that lofty castle perched on the mountains. Lord Robin Arryn received them, pale-faced. He recounted how villagers in the foothills had disappeared, how nights in the Vale seemed unnaturally cold. Strange lights were reported on the slopes after moonrise, ghostly glimmers that formed circular patterns. The few who had ventured close swore they heard whispers in a tongue not spoken by men. Brienne listened gravely, and Bran's expression seemed carved from ice. They did not linger at the Eyrie longer than necessary. With Robin's blessing, they descended into the foothills where the incidents had occurred. The land was stark, frosted with snow, and the wind moaned through narrow passes. The company's breath formed clouds as they trudged through half-frozen streams. Up ahead, knights carried torches to supplement the wan winter sun that disappeared behind peaks mid-afternoon. Dusk fell early in these mountains. The first village they encountered was deserted, as reported. Doors were smashed open, yet no bodies littered the ground. Pots and plates lay scattered, as though the inhabitants had fled mid-meal. And on one wall, drawn in what might have been blood, was a swirl symbol, reminiscent of what Bran had seen beneath the Red Keep. The men grew uneasy. Some whispered of White Walkers, but there were no footprints or shards of ice. Only an unsettling hush. Bran insisted on being taken inside the largest structure, a communal hall now eerie in its emptiness. Podrick helped him, while Brienne ordered the men to secure the perimeter. Bran closed his eyes, letting his head tilt back as though listening to voices only he could hear. Then he opened them with a gasp. They were taken, but not by whites, he said, voice trembling. They followed a call, an enchantment that drew them up into the mountains. Some kind of ritual site. I can feel their fear. Brienne's jaw clenched. We have to follow. But how do we fight enchantments? Bran's mouth pressed tight, eyes flickering with so many hidden thoughts. We must break the source. The old magic. These circles, it's part of the same pattern the White Walkers used to mark their territory. But there's no Night King to control them. It's as though the magic itself is seeping, seeking a new shape. We must end it, or it will keep spreading. Brienne gave a curt nod. She called Gendry's men over, explained they would press higher into the mountains. The cold was biting, but they had no choice. If villagers were alive somewhere, enthralled or otherwise, they had to try to save them. In the 2 days that followed, the company scaled treacherous paths, guided by Bran's cryptic knowledge. Eventually, they reached a rocky plateau overlooking a vast chasm, the wind howling like a living thing. Snowdrifts and jagged stones made every step perilous. And there, in the gloom of dusk, they spotted a flicker of eerie greenish light emanating from a cave mouth. The swirl symbol had been carved around it. Cautiously, they approached. Brienne led with sword in hand, Gendry at her side, men fanning out behind, lanterns flickering. The light within the cave pulsed like a living heartbeat. A low chanting, indistinct but mesmerizing, drifted on the wind. As the group drew closer, a figure stepped out, a gaunt, wild-eyed man with sallow skin and tattered clothing. He gazed at them as though possessed, lifting his arms in supplication. Then, with a sudden shriek, he charged. Brienne's sword flashed. The man was cut down, but he scarcely reacted to the blow. He collapsed with a feral grin, whispering something about the call of the dark. Alarmed, the company pressed into the cave. Inside, they found a scene reminiscent of nightmares, a cluster of ragged villagers kneeling in a circular pattern, chanting in an unknown tongue. At the center stood a large stone altar. The swirl symbols were scratched into every surface. A faint green luminescence clung to the walls, some phosphorescent moss or a residue of old magic. The air was thick with dread. Bran felt it like a physical weight, nearly doubling over. Podrick held him upright. One of the kneeling villagers, a woman with hollow eyes, turned to them, voice raspy. "He calls, we obey?" Then she let out a piercing wail. The other enthralled villagers rose, stumbling toward the intruders. Their movements were jerky, unnatural. They attacked with bare hands, with broken farm tools, oblivious to pain or fear. Brienne's knights tried to subdue them gently, not wanting to kill innocents. But the villagers fought with shocking strength. One knight was seized by 3 enthralled men and bashed against the wall. Another fended off a wild slash from a rusty scythe. Meanwhile, Gendry and his men formed a shield wall, trying to push forward. At the altar, a figure loomed, a hunched shape that barely looked human. Its face was obscured by an animal skull mask from which horns jutted. In the flickering light, it raised bony arms overhead, chanting. The swirl pattern etched in the stone began to glow. Bran's eyes rolled back. He let out a choked cry. "That's the vessel, the dark magic is using him. Stop him, break the swirl." Brienne nodded fiercely, bellowing for her men to press forward. She hacked her way through 2 enthralled villagers, knocking them aside with the flat of her blade, only resorting to lethal force when one stabbed at her with a jagged pitchfork. The chanting rose to a fever pitch. Her breath seared in her lungs, every sense alert to the wrongness in the air. The horned figure stepped off the altar. In one hand it clutched a knotted staff, from which hung bones and feathers. It hissed an inhuman sound. The swirl on the altar flared brighter, illuminating the cave with ghastly green. The enthralled villagers threw themselves at Brienne, sacrificing themselves to block her path. Each blow she dealt felt like fighting the living dead. These were good folk, likely once, now twisted by an ancient force. At last, Gendry and his men managed to encircle the villagers, pushing them back. Podrick maneuvered Bran closer, though carefully out of reach of the maddened throng. Bran's lips moved silently, as though he was reciting some incantation or focusing his warding powers. The horned figure turned sharply, sensing Bran. It screeched, brandishing the staff. A wave of invisible force slammed outward, knocking Gendry's men to their knees. Brienne staggered, nearly losing her footing. Torchlight flickered, threatened to die. The swirling green glow intensified. Bran, trembling, stared at the figure. "You are but a fragment. A leftover from the night. You cannot have these people. You cannot have this land." The figure's voice emerged, raspy and full of ancient malice. "All is part of the cycle. The children awakened it. The men fueled it with blood. We remain." Bran exhaled raggedly. He closed his eyes. Suddenly, his mind soared beyond the cave, taking flight with ravens that perched in the mountains with the ancient weirwoods far away. He drew upon the old gods. The swirl pattern, the symbol of creation and destruction, threatened to flood the cave with a tide of malevolent energy. But if he could sever its link to living minds, if he could break the enthrallment. He felt the power surge through him, an echo of the green sight. The figure shrieked, trying to maintain control, but in that moment, Brienne found her opening. She lunged forward, shield raised. One enthralled villager flung himself at her, but she barreled through, swinging her sword in a mighty arc. The blade crashed down upon the horned figure's staff, splintering it. Another swift blow tore through the skull mask, revealing a pallid face contorted with unnatural rage. With a final thrust, Brienne ran her sword clean through his chest. A deafening wail filled the cave, echoing off the walls. The swirling glow sputtered. Villagers collapsed to the ground as though their strings were cut. The figure slid off Brienne's sword, collapsing in a pool of blackish blood. Its eyes fixed upon Bran for one last moment, spitting a curse or plea in an unknown tongue, then went still. The greenish light extinguished in an instant. Darkness rushed in, leaving only the flicker of torches, the ragged breathing of knights. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Gendry knelt to check on the unconscious villagers. Some stirred, groaning. The enthrallment was broken. Brienne panted, sword tip dropping to the stone. Bran slumped in his chair, eyes fluttering open, pale as death. Podrick hovered anxiously. "Is it over?" Brienne asked in a hushed tone. Bran closed his eyes, sensing the dissipating magic. "Yes. For now. We broke the snode, this vessel. The darkness will retreat. It may find other cracks in the world, but we've prevented it here." Brienne exhaled, relief flooding her. She barked orders to her men, telling them to tend to the injured. Outside the cave, dawn light crept across the snows, painting the peaks with cold fire. It was over. The swirl was shattered. That day, they brought the surviving villagers back to a safer settlement. Many remembered little of their enthrallment, only that they had heard a voice in dreams. Some wept, thanking the knights for rescue. Others were disoriented, uncertain how to return to normal life. But at least they were alive, no longer servants to a dark ritual. Bran sat in the wagon, recovering from the strain. The wind was gentler now, as though the mountains themselves exhaled relief. Brienne approached him, kneeling by his side. "You saved them," she said. "Without your warnings, we would have been too late." Bran's lips curved into a faint, tired smile. "I only did what I was meant to do. Knowledge is my gift, for better or worse. I see the old powers stirring in the corners. But we can face them if we do not let fear blind us." Brienne nodded, grateful. "We'll take you home," she said. "Yes," Bran agreed, though his eyes roved the horizon. "Home, for the moment. Then there may be other corners of the realm that need watching." Gendry approached, wiping sweat from his brow. "All's clear, Lord Bran. We'll head back to the Eyrie, resupply, and then on to King's Landing. The Queen will want a full report." They set out, battered but victorious. Word of their success spread quickly, bolstering hope in the Vale and beyond. The tales grew in the telling, how the Wolf Queen's brother, the Boy of Visions, had vanquished a monstrous cult with the help of the stalwart Lady Knight. Though the truth was more nuanced, the effect was the same. People began to believe that perhaps the new reign would see them safeguarded from unnatural terrors as well as mortal ones. When at last they returned to King's Landing, the winter wind had truly set in. The city's walls were dusted with snow, something seldom seen so far south. Sansa welcomed them in the courtyard, relief plain on her face. She embraced Brienne, clasped Gendry's arm in thanks, and then turned to Bran. He sat in his chair, eyes weary but calm, a distant serenity about him. "You did it?" she asked softly. Bran nodded. The threat was contained. Sansa's gaze flicked to Brienne, who described the ordeal in subdued detail. Horror shadowed Sansa's features, but so did resolve. "We can't allow such pockets of evil to grow. We must be vigilant." Bran agreed, though quietly. "That is why we must remain united as best we can. Division and chaos only feed these old forces. They thrive on death and despair." A tired smile tugged at Sansa's lips. "Then we have our work cut out for us. Come, let us go inside. You must rest and warm yourself. I'll have a feast prepared for the men. Tonight, we celebrate that the realm holds still." Thus, winter deepened in the Seven Kingdoms. Under the Wolf Queen's rule, battered but unbroken, the people repaired walls, rebuilt towns, and slowly nurtured a fragile peace. With every passing day, Sansa learned the balancing act required of a monarch: forging alliances, quelling disputes, ensuring harvests, and smoothing tensions. She used her cunning to keep the realm's lords in line, employing mercy when she could, severity when she must. Tyrion advised, Davos coordinated trade, Gendry trained men to guard the roads, Brienne kept the peace. Through it all, Bran hovered at the edge, neither king nor typical lord, offering guidance in glimpses. He refused the throne, but in truth, he shaped the realm from behind the scenes as much as any ruler might. His visions allowed Sansa to anticipate challenges, to send aid to regions threatened by ominous rumors, to deter the stirrings of leftover Targaryen loyalists who might have conspired to raise a new dragon from hidden eggs, though none were found. He became a silent guardian of Westeros, forever watchful, seeing paths that no one else could. Sometimes, Sansa would look at him and wonder if he regretted his refusal. But whenever she asked, he'd only give her that calm, sad smile. "I am where I need to be," he would say. "You are the queen, you have the heart for it. I have something else." And in time, the name of Bran the Broken became legend among the small folk, but not as the king on the Iron Throne. Rather, he was known as the Watcher in the Shadows, the keeper of old secrets, a hero who quietly roamed the realm's hidden places to seal away curses and quell lingering horrors born of the long night. Ballads and stories sprang up. Children whispered that if dark magic rose, the quiet, crippled boy with strange powers would appear to banish it. All the while, Sansa's reign became more secure. She wrote to Arya in far distant lands, hearing tales of wonders across uncharted seas. She heard from Jon only rarely, an occasional raven from Castle Black, describing the new wildling settlements beyond the wall. Life persisted. The scars of war did not vanish, but they did not fester into new wars. Regions that had declared independence largely kept to themselves, or engaged in trade. The alliance that recognized the Wolf Queen's suzerainty stayed steadfast, for none wished to revisit the horror of the past decade. In the end, Bran Stark's refusal to take the throne proved a strange blessing. Freed from the chains of monarchy, he walked the realm in spirit, bridging past and future, ensuring that the tragedies that once befell Westeros would not be repeated without warning. And Sansa Stark, the reluctant queen, grew into her crown with a measured grace, forging a new path for the continent, one of alliances more voluntary than enforced, one in which old powers were met with new resilience. And so, in the nights to come, when winter was at its darkest and the old ghosts rattled in the corners of memory, the people of Westeros took heart in the knowledge that while a new queen sat the throne, the boy who could see all had chosen a humbler seat. One that let him preserve the realm in ways that no king of the past had ever managed. And in that quiet refusal, destiny shifted, forging a future where the flames of war cooled and ancient shadows were watched with vigilant eyes. No one could say that Bran Stark was absent from the story of the realm, for in truth, he was at its heart, orchestrating from the periphery. He guided ravens across the snows, gleaned truths from the weirwoods, and whispered warnings to those who needed them. He was not a king but an architect, ensuring that the Game of Thrones did not devour everyone in its path. Sansa, the Wolf Queen, reigned with compassion and firmness in equal measure, forging a better realm than any had thought possible. Peace, though never guaranteed, became more than a fleeting rumor. Many years later, when bards sang of the War of the Five Kings, of Daenerys Targaryen's conquest and fall, of the Long Night and the final dragon fire that left King's Landing in ashes, they would also tell of the final choice. How the boy with the power to see all refused the throne, how that single act changed the fate of the realm. They would sing of the queen who wore a simple crown of silver, who united those who would unite and let free those who yearned for freedom. They would sing of how old evils rose again, only to be met by the unwavering vigilance of knights and the strange gifts of a three-eyed raven. In time, even the swirl markings faded from memory and the altars in hidden caves crumbled. The whispers of the White Walkers became legends told around winter fires, cautionary tales about the price of ignoring shadows. Yet whenever a rumor surfaced of unnatural sightings, an eerie swirl of stone, a circle of bones discovered in the wilderness, men and women would travel at once to root it out, guided by the stories of how quickly such things could spread. More often than not, a silent figure in a wheeled chair would arrive, or a messenger bearing his seal, offering uncanny insight. In that way, the dark powers were kept at bay, not destroyed but ever watched. The final note of that age was not triumph or conquest, but quiet diligence. "We must watch the shadows," Queen Sansa would remind her council. "Light alone does not banish them, vigilance does." And so she reigned, beloved by some, disliked by others, but respected by all for her unwavering stance against tyranny and neglect. She never forgot the day Bran refused the throne, how it shaped every choice she made thereafter. Some nights she would climb the highest tower in the Red Keep, rebuilt in part, though never wholly restored to the grand seat it once was, and she would look out over the city. Snow would swirl in the air, and she would think of the boy she'd once known, the brother who wanted only to climb walls and see the view from the top. Now he saw so much more, and it weighed on him. But in saving him from the weight of the crown, she had, in some sense, saved them all. For knowledge was a heavy burden, but it was also a shield, one that needed a free hand to wield. Thus ended the chapter of war and chaos that had threatened Westeros for so long. A new chapter began, penned by the Wolf Queen and the Watcher in the Shadows, neither of whom had sought their roles but both of whom rose to meet them. There would be trials yet to come, in the swirl of politics and magic, in the slow turning of seasons. But the realm endured. And through the howling winds of winter, when men's hearts quailed, they reminded each other of a single refrain. The Starks do not yield. Not even when offered the greatest seat of power. If they stand together, one on the throne, one in the shadows, Westeros may yet know peace for another turning of the years. The seasons turned slowly, winter deepening its hold on the land as the new age of the Wolf Queen continued. In the battered Red Keep, Sansa Stark's presence had become a steadying force, a quiet anchor for the realm that chose her. Rebuilding was underway in every corner of the Crownlands, funded by careful management of coin, by alliances hammered out with the Westerlands and the Stormlands, by a newly strengthened relationship with the Vale. And though the city's prosperity was still a far-off dream, the people had begun to whisper that they had never seen the capital so earnest in its efforts to heal. Beyond the walls, icicles clustered on the half-repaired battlements, and the snowdrifts outside the gates sparkled in the meager winter sun. Many in King's Landing, long accustomed to mild winters, shuddered at this deeper cold. Yet it was not the same cataclysmic winter that once threatened to blanket the entire realm during the long night. The cold was bone-chilling, true, but it carried no wailing hordes of whites, no white walkers prowling beyond the horizon. All the same, the world felt altered by what had come before. A hush lay over King's Landing, as though everyone sensed the presence of old powers at the margins, resentful that their time of terror was over but not entirely ended. Their existence persisted in half-forgotten corners among the haunted ruins and hidden caves. And still, the Wolf Queen sat each day in her throne room, diligently hearing petitions and issuing commands, forging a future from the debris of war. One day, well into the deeper snows, Sansa was roused before dawn by a frantic messenger who hammered on the sturdy oak doors of her solar. Rubbing her eyes, she rose from the narrow bed to which she had grown accustomed. She refused to install a grander one until the city's poor had better living conditions. Dressed quickly and escorted by her guards, she admitted the messenger at once. She recognized the man by his cloak, a swatch of heavy brown wool pinned at the shoulder with the crescent moon of the Vale. "Your Grace," he gasped, teeth chattering from the chill, "I bring dire tidings from the Eyrie and from the foothills once more." Sansa's heart seemed to skip. She recalled the recent incursion of dark magic that Brienne and Bran had vanquished. "Tell me," she said, voice firm despite her inner dread. "There has been a resurgence of strange events," the messenger said, bowing so low his face nearly touched the stone floor. "In the mountain passes near the Bloody Gate, travelers have gone missing. Knights dispatched to find them returned shaking, babbling about lights in the sky, pale, flickering glimmers shaped like the swirl symbols. Rumors abound that the entire region is cursed." He swallowed hard. "Lord Robin Arryn sends his urgent request. What is to be done? He begs your counsel and your soldiers." Sansa let out a long, quiet exhale. The swirl again. Another crack in the world. She had half hoped that the business in that cave had been the last echo of the White Walkers' unholy patterns. But the forces that Bran sensed were stirring, and it seemed they would not settle so easily into oblivion. "All right," she said. "We will send help. But first let me consult with." She hesitated, for in that moment she remembered that Bran had left the capital only a few days prior. He had gone west to investigate old rumors near Crack Claw Point, along the edges of the Crownlands, which formed a pincer with the Bay of Crabs. He had been insistent. "I've had a vision of something stirring in the bogs," he had told her. "I must see it myself." So, with Podrick and a small escort, he had set out. And now here she was, hearing of fresh trouble in the Vale with no three-eyed raven on hand. Swallowing a twinge of dread, she concluded, "We will do what must be done. For now, rest here, warm yourself, and eat. I'll have the council convene within the hour." The messenger bowed gratefully. Sansa turned to one of her guard captains, instructing him to lead the man to the kitchens. Then, alone for a moment, she pressed a hand to her brow. How often must these new pockets of darkness arise? She recalled Bran's words about vigilance, that ignoring such shadows only gave them more room to thrive. She must deal with it swiftly and decisively, or risk letting fear choke the Vale and spread southward. But with Bran absent, she could only guess at the nature of this incursion. It might be a petty group of cultists, or some deeper infiltration of magic, or something else entirely. She summoned her small council. Tyrion Lannister arrived looking bleary-eyed but alert, a sheaf of parchment tucked under his arm. Ser Davos Seaworth came next, shrugging off his heavy fur cloak. Gendry Baratheon strode in behind him, partially in armor, as though he expected to ride out at once. And lastly, Ser Brienne of Tarth, captain of the Queen's Guard and perhaps Sansa's most trusted sword, entered with her usual quiet strength. She inclined her head, apologizing for her uncombed hair, which she had hastily tied back. Sansa wasted no time. She explained the messenger's tale. They listened, expressions grim. When she finished, she said, "Bran is not here, and it may be some time before we can reach him. But we can't let this fester. Someone must go investigate and, if need be, stamp out whatever trouble is taking root in the Vale." Tyrion cleared his throat. Would it be prudent to send a large force? In the midst of winter, that might be an uncomfortable journey. Davos nodded. And if we leave the city unguarded, we risk bandits or other opportunists. The Crownlands still have their share of outlaws picking over the remains of war. Sansa took a moment to think. She understood their concerns but also recognized that half measures might lead to failure if this was indeed another surge of the old evil. "I'll not send half the city watch," she said. "But we need a contingent large enough to handle the unknown. Ser Brienne, you and I both know it might require more than swords if the swirl markings are involved. Still, swords will help in dealing with enthralled cultists or other mortal threats. Will you lead this mission?" Brienne inclined her head. "If you wish it, my queen, I'll do so. But I must point out that if it truly is an echo of that same dark magic, we'll want someone with deeper knowledge." Sansa's hands tightened on the arms of her seat. She cast a glance at the vacant place where Bran often sat in council. He had no official title, yet his presence was constant in spirit. "Yes, someone like Bran," she murmured. "Without him, we must rely on the knowledge gleaned from the last incursion. Perhaps you recall details from the cave, Ser Brienne? Or from the villagers who survived?" "Some," Brienne said slowly. "We learned that destroying the focal point of the magic, the staff, the altar, the living conduit, broke the enchantment. That may hold true again. If there's some central artifact or person channeling it, we must strike at the heart." Gendry stood a little straighter. "Then that's our plan. We form an expedition, find the heart of this new swirl, and destroy it." He paused, brow creasing. "But this time, we'll have to be cautious. The Vale is mountainous terrain. If these zealots or spirits are hiding in caverns, we need men who can handle climbing, who can survive the cold. My Stormland recruits might manage, but they'll need help from Vale guides." Tyrion interjected, "We might also want to consider forging a direct alliance with the Vale's knights. Lord Robin will, no doubt, offer them, but the Vale knights can be proud and slow to obey outside command. You'll need a firm sense of leadership. Ser Brienne, how do you feel about coordinating with the Vale lords after the last time?" Brienne kept her posture rigid. "I've learned enough courtesy to keep them in line. And if they doubt me, they need only remember how we dispatched that cult in the mountains. I have no illusions that they'll be easy to handle, but we have no choice." Sansa nodded her approval. "Good. So be it. Brienne, you'll lead. Gendry, spare me a solid contingent of your Stormlanders to accompany her. Tyrion, write to Robin Arryn, tell him we're coming and expect him to provide hospitality and local guides. Davos, see to the logistics of travel. We'll need supplies for a winter journey across mountainous terrain, enough to last through any delays." They agreed. Before they disbanded, Sansa rose, walking around the table to stand close to Brienne. "Be careful," she said quietly. "I need you to return safely. The realm does too. If this threat is bigger than we can handle, send word at once, and we'll recall Bran, or we'll dispatch further forces." Brienne's expression softened. "I will, Your Grace. I won't take any foolish risks." The next day, the courtyard of the Red Keep bustled with activity, horses snorting vapor, stable hands loading wagons, knights donning layers of fur over their armor. The clang of steel, the shuffle of boots, and the shouting of orders filled the cold air. Snow crunched underfoot, though within the city's walls it was a thin covering, muddy where the populace trod. The men wore the cloaks of the Crownlands or the Stormlands, plus a handful from the small personal guard Sansa had begun to cultivate. Brienne, astride a sturdy courser, frowned at the sky. Heavy gray clouds threatened more snowfall. She turned to ensure Podrick was there. Indeed, Pod was double-checking the buckles on his horse's saddle, glancing anxiously around as if recalling old horrors in the Vale. Gendry oversaw a pair of wagons that held tents, rations, and basic medical supplies. Everyone murmured about the swirling rumors that more dead might be rising or that wicked spirits roamed the passes. They looked to Brienne for confidence, and though she felt tension in her stomach, she kept her jaw set and her posture firm. Sansa came down from the keep's steps to see them off. She wore a cloak of gray wool trimmed with white fur, the new queen's crown nestled in the bright auburn hair braided at her back. "Gods be with you," she said to Brienne, her breath forming a faint cloud. Then she turned to Gendry. "Thank you for offering your men. I know you've had your hands full training new recruits. Gendry gave a half-grin. But I wouldn't sit idle while the Vale endures something like this. Better to end it now than let it spread. Besides, half my men are eager for action. They complain that the city watch sees too little these days. Sansa cast him a wry look. Let's hope they don't regret that sentiment. Tyrion approached, carefully avoiding a patch of ice, and handed Brienne a sealed letter. That's for Robin Arryn from the Queen. It explains our intentions, requests his cooperation, and so forth. I tried not to be too wordy. Brienne tucked it into a leather pouch. Thank you, my lord. The farewells were brief, for time was pressing. The company of knights and foot soldiers, perhaps 50 in total, departed through the city gates, winding north and then east, bound for the Vale. Sansa and Tyrion lingered on the ramparts, watching them shrink into the distance. Once they were gone, Sansa released a quiet sigh and turned back inside. She knew well that all she could do now was attend to her own duties and pray that Brienne would accomplish her mission. With Bran away and the Vale under threat, a quiet dread coiled in her gut. How many times would the swirl of old magic reappear? In the days that followed, King's Landing continued its slow routine of governance. Sansa sat upon her carved weirwood throne each morning, hearing from petitioners, some complaining of theft, others praising the new queen's justice. A few came seeking royal assistance in rebuilding their homes. She listened attentively, measuring each request and ensuring that neither the noble houses nor the commoners were overlooked. She had learned that the seeds of resentment took root easily among those who felt forgotten. Tyrion, often present, grew adept at balancing the books, carefully designating funds for repairs. He did so with an air of weary determination. He had once dreamed of a realm at peace, with a wise monarch who might break the cycle of bloody succession wars. Now in Sansa he saw a glimmer of that possibility, even if the monarchy itself was changed, a patchwork of alliances rather than absolute rule. And though he still bore the weight of his past mistakes, Sansa saw that he poured all his cunning into trying to see the realm thrive. Davos, for his part, spent considerable time traveling along the Crownland's coast, ensuring shipping lanes remained open despite the cold. He occasionally reported sightings of battered merchant vessels from Pentos or Lys, some carrying meager supplies or seeking trade. Winter had dampened traffic, but he insisted that forging relationships with Essos might prove beneficial in the future. Sansa approved, partly out of hope that renewed commerce could fill the realm's coffers. Meanwhile, on many nights, Sansa struggled to sleep. She would pace the corridors of the Red Keep, passing newly restored tapestries, a few of them bearing the direwolf sigil, and think of Bran, wonder what he might discover in the bogs near Cracklaw Point. She worried over Brienne's expedition to the Vale, prayed to the old gods and the Seven alike that it would not devolve into a slaughter. The weight of all the realm's troubles pressed upon her. Yet she kept her composure by day, presenting a calm, regal front for her people. At length, nearly 3 weeks after Brienne's departure, a raven arrived from the Vale. Sansa received the parchment in her solar with Tyrion at her side. Her fingers trembled as she broke the seal. It read, "Your Grace, we have arrived in the Vale without incident and joined Lord Robin Arryn's knights. Strange happenings have indeed increased, lights in the sky, swirl sigils carved into old stones near the Bloody Gate. We are investigating. A local shepherd's family has vanished, leaving behind frantic scrawls of the symbol on their walls. I suspect the same force we quelled before is at work, but it may be stronger. Lord Robin claims a group of zealots, led by a self-styled prophet of the old world, has been sighted in the mountains, rumored to worship the White Walkers as gods. We have yet to confront them directly, but we are closing in. I remain confident we can handle this. Please know that we proceed with caution and have posted scouts throughout the passes. So far, few lives have been lost, but the fear is rising among the populace. We will do all in our power to protect them. Ser Brienne of Tarth." Sansa let out a slow breath, relief mingled with worry. Tyrion peered over her shoulder, lips pursed. A prophet of the old world? Worshippers of the White Walkers? Madness, perhaps, but not surprising to see fanatics seize upon the memory of that dark power. It fits Bran's warnings, Sansa murmured. That hatred can take root anywhere men let it. And from that root, the old magic can sprout again. Tyrion folded his arms. Brienne sounds confident. If anyone can keep a level head, it's her. Let's trust she'll see it through. Sansa nodded, eyes distant. Yes. But if they truly face a strong cult, the zealots might not be so easily destroyed. And we don't have the advantage of Bran's insight this time. She paused. We should keep men on standby in case she calls for reinforcements. Tyrion agreed, and they began making quiet preparations, no mass mobilization, but enough that a second force could be dispatched if a raven summoned them. Each day, Sansa awaited further word, but as a fortnight passed, no new messages arrived from the Vale. The silence weighed upon her. Snow fell thicker in the Crownlands, blanketing roads and farmland. Hunger grew in some outlying villages, though Davos did his best to arrange relief. Finally, another raven came, late in the evening. Sansa read it by torchlight in the presence of Tyrion, Davos, and a few of her trusted guards. The parchment contained spattered, hurried writing. At once her stomach clenched. "Your Grace, we have engaged the cult's outer members and discovered horrifying practices. In a cavern system near the heights of the Giants' Lance, they have built altars reminiscent of the swirl signs from the Long Night. They sacrifice animals and, we fear, some of the missing villagers. Their prophet claims to channel the spirit of the Night King, though that may be blasphemous rambling. Yet we cannot dismiss his power. Some men who faced him froze in place, as though touched by a lesser form of the White Walker's icy magic. We attempted a direct assault, but the caves are well defended and many of the cult's followers fight like men possessed. We lost good knights. Lord Robin Arryn is hesitant to send more from the Eyrie, fearing a trap. My forces are stalemated. We must find a way to dispel this magic or face an endless battle in the tunnels. I suspect only a direct strike against the prophet's artifact, some twisted idol or staff, will suffice, as with the last cult. But the deeper caverns are nearly inaccessible without suffering ambush. I intend to press forward with a smaller contingent to break their circle from within. If we fail, we may require immediate reinforcements or even the presence of Brandon Stark. I will write again when ABL. Ser Brienne of Tarth. A hush fell upon the Solar. Sansa's knuckles whitened around the parchment. Davos sighed, shaking his head. Tyrion's face grew grim. Another swirl cult, Tyrion muttered. This is no small band of outlaws, from the sound of it. They have real, dangerous power. Sansa pressed her lips together. Brienne believes they cling to the remnants of the White Walker's magic. If that's true, it must be snuffed out quickly. If it spreads beyond the Vale, the realm might be plunged into chaos again. Davos met her gaze. Should we muster a larger force right away, Your Grace? Wait for Brienne's next raven, or act now? A troubled silence lingered. Sansa imagined the difficulty of marching a large army through the treacherous mountain passes in deep winter. Such a force might take weeks to arrive, by which time the cult could grow bolder or be destroyed by Brienne's efforts. Yet the letter hinted that Brienne could fail. If she did, the Vale would be thrown into panic. After a moment, Sansa made her decision. We'll prepare a second force, she said. 1,000 men if we can gather them quickly from the Crownlands and the Stormlands. Gendry is away, but we can issue the order to his captains. We won't deploy them unless Brienne confirms she needs them, but I want them ready to ride at a moment's notice. Tyrion, see to the resources required. Davos, coordinate the supply lines so they can march through winter conditions. They nodded, each hurrying off to their tasks. Sansa was left alone with her swirling thoughts. She recalled the day Bran had refused the throne. Had he foreseen that these pockets of dark magic would keep erupting? She wondered if, somehow, having him on the throne would have changed matters. But no, she remembered his reasons, how he believed he needed freedom to watch the shadows. Perhaps this was the shape of a realm in which old horrors did not vanish quietly. She found herself praying not only to the old gods of the north but to the seven that Brienne would prevail. And in a corner of her mind she feared for the realm if more and more of these cults arose. Would Westeros forever battle these remnants of the White Walker's power? Could even Bran contain it all? 3 days later, on a bitterly cold morning when the sun was pale and weak, a gate guard arrived in the throne room announcing that a lone traveler had come from the north seeking audience. Sansa's curiosity was piqued. She granted permission at once. Soon, a figure in a heavy cloak of gray fur was ushered forward, boots crusted with ice, breath curling in the frigid air. He lowered his hood, revealing features Sansa recognized at once, the gaunt face, the haunted eyes, the scar that ran from brow to cheek. Tormund Giantsbane. She had not seen him since the aftermath of the Long Night, when he had accompanied Jon Snow back to the Wall and beyond. The wildling gave a half-grin that did not fully touch his eyes, then bowed awkwardly, as if uncertain of southern customs. "My queen," he said in his gravelly voice. Sansa stood, descending the few steps from her throne, ignoring Tyrion's curious look. "Tormund Giantsbane," she said. "You've come a long way. Did Jon send you?" Tormund nodded, tugging at the thick fur. "Aye. He sends word from beyond the wall, though I'm not sure if it's the sort of word a queen likes to hear." His expression turned grave. "May we speak quieter?" She led him to a side chamber where only Tyrion, Davos, and a couple of guards remained. Servants hurried to light a brazier, bringing warmth into the musty space. Tormund glanced around, as though the polished stone and tapestries unnerved him. Then he cleared his throat. "We've made a settlement up there, beyond the old wall," Tormund said. "Jon Snow's been leading us. Well, we let him think he's leading us, though you know how he is, always moody." He gave a brief bark of laughter, but it died quickly. Anyway, some free folk scouted further north, near the frozen shore. They saw shapes, strange lights, a swirl. Sansa and Tyrion exchanged alarmed glances. Even Davos shifted uncomfortably. "A swirl," Tyrion repeated. "Like the White Walker symbol?" Tormund shrugged, though worry flickered in his eyes. "Sounds like it. I didn't see it myself, but the free folk who did said it was carved into the ice. No sign of the dead walking, but the animals nearby were spooked. We've lost a few hunters who never returned. Could be a new tribe of wildlings or could be something worse. Jon told me to come south, let you know. Figure if there's anything stirring up there, you might want to keep watch." Sansa felt as though the floor tilted under her feet. Another swirl? Another manifestation of the old power now beyond the wall? That was the seat of the White Walker's domain once. If something was reviving up there, it could be cataclysmic. She inhaled, steadying herself. "Thank you for bringing this news, Tormund. We must address a crisis in the Vale at present. Dark magic that also uses swirl symbols." She hesitated, measuring Tormund's expression. "Are you certain the White Walkers themselves aren't reforming?" He snorted. "I saw the Night King fall with my own eyes. We all did. The free folk danced on the ashes after. But the land up there has its own secrets. Maybe it's some group of fools worshipping the old legends, trying to harness what's gone. Or maybe it's something worse." He paused. "All I know is Jon's uneasy. He says there's a strange feeling in the wind, and he's not the type for fancy talk." He said, "We can't pretend it's impossible that something new is rising. So he told me to warn you." Sansa's heart clenched. She recalled how Jon had always been watchful, never ignoring small omens. If he was worried, that meant plenty. She glanced at Tyrion and Davos, who read her fear plainly. "We must keep eyes on the north as well," she said. "But we can't send a large force beyond the wall in the dead of winter. We barely have enough men to address the crisis in the Vale." Tormund nodded. "We didn't expect an army. Just letting you know we're handling it the best we can. The free folk are good scouts. If anything truly dangerous emerges, we'll send a raven. Or maybe I'll come myself if ravens freeze on the way." He chuckled grimly. "But your brother, maybe if he could see something with those weird powers of his." "He's not here," Sansa said. "He went to investigate rumors near Cracklaw Point. He's likely still out there, beyond easy reach. But I'll attempt to send him a message. Perhaps he can glean something from a distance." She paused, glancing at Tyrion. "Though we know how unpredictable his visions can be." Tormund crossed his arms. "Well, I won't stay long in this city of yours. I'll leave in a day or two once I've rested. We have more to do up north. But Jon wanted me to say he's sorry. He regrets leaving you with so much responsibility. But he can't bring himself to come south." Sansa swallowed. "I understand." In truth, a pang of longing struck her. She remembered the boy who had grown into a man, who had fought so hard for the north, who had killed Daenerys to save the realm. Now he exiled himself among the free folk, weighed down by guilt. She was not angry with him, only sad that the scars of war had shattered so many lives. She took a breath. "Send Jon my regards. Tell him, if the threat grows, we will muster what we can." Tormund gave a curt nod. "I will. Thank you, Queen Stark." After Tormund left the chamber, Sansa turned to Tyrion and Davos. A quiet dread settled between them. "So we have dark stirrings in the Vale and beyond the wall," Sansa said softly. "That's two corners of the realm. And more rumors could surface anywhere," Tyrion added. "We still have no direct word from Bran. He could be dealing with a third." Davos sighed. "Let's hope we can handle them one at a time." Sansa's mind raced. "We have no choice but to trust Brienne for now in the Vale and trust Jon in the far north. I'll try to send a raven to Bran at Cracklaw Point, though I doubt it will find him quickly. Let's proceed with our earlier plan, keep the second force prepared, awaiting Brienne's call." They agreed. And so winter wore on, tension rising in Sansa's heart as each day brought no further updates from Brienne, from the Vale, from the north, or from Bran. The city itself felt eerily calm, as though the world outside was roiling with hidden storms while King's Landing slumbered beneath its snows. Sansa continued her queenly duties, receiving visitors, dispensing justice, quietly gathering resources for a realm that might soon find itself in a larger war against the shadows. She managed to keep fear at bay by focusing on each immediate task. Ensuring the city watch was well supplied, checking in with orphanages that had sprung up to care for children left by the last wars, drafting new trade agreements so they wouldn't starve in the cold. Yet every time she retired to her solar at night, the swirl symbol haunted her thoughts. Then, one morning, nearly 5 weeks after Brienne's departure, Sansa was awakened by an urgent pounding at her door. She rose at once, slipping into a warm robe. A guard's voice called through the wood, "Your Grace, we've a visitor who claims to be from the Vale expedition. He's in bad shape." Heart-hammering, she hurried to the receiving hall. There, near a blazing hearth, a man lay on a bench, half-conscious, covered in furs. His face was ghostly pale. He wore battered mail with the sigil of the Stormlands. 2 maesters hovered over him, pressing bandages to a wound in his side. Sansa moved closer, ignoring the swirl of concerned voices, and gently touched the man's shoulder. "Who are you?" she asked softly. He tried to focus on her. "Your Grace," he rasped. "Name's Martin. I rode with Ser Brienne to the Vale." "Oh gods," he winced, sucking in a trembling breath. "We were ambushed, in the mountains. She fought like fury, but the cult was stronger than we reckoned. They had more men, more monstrous power. Some knights turned on us, enthralled, we think. They fought with blank eyes. We had to retreat." Sansa's stomach twisted in fear. "Brienne? Did she survive?" Martin swallowed hard. "She and Podrick forced us to withdraw from the caves, said we had to break free or be overrun. She stayed behind with a small group to cover our retreat and keep the cult from chasing us. Last I saw, they were still fighting. They told me to ride for the Queen, to warn you. That was 5 days ago." Sansa felt as though the walls closed in on her. She sank onto the bench beside Martin, her hand shaking. "5 days," she whispered. "Is she alive?" "I don't know," Martin said, eyes brimming with tears. "I hope so. But the cult had conjured some sort of cold fire in the caverns. We lost at least half our force. The Vale Knights scattered, or else they were killed or enthralled. It's a nightmare, my queen." Sansa stared at him, dread pulsing in her veins. Ser Brienne, the bravest knight she knew, the one who had saved them so many times. She had marched boldly into the Vale's mountains, trying to contain the darkness. Now she might be lost. Sansa's mind whirled. "Do you know if the cult is contained, or if they're spreading outward?" Martin blinked, pain etched into his face. "Some fled, might have told the Eyrie to seal its gates. The cult is definitely expanding. There were new converts, some knights of the Vale, peasants. We even saw men from the Riverlands who must have come over the passes. I fear we can't hold them. That's why I had to get here, to beg for help." Tyrion and Davos had arrived by now, listening grimly. Sansa swallowed, turned to them. "We must act at once. We'll send the second force. You'll lead it, Davos?" Davos hesitated. "I'm no great warrior, my queen. Perhaps Gendry's captains." "He's away," Sansa said. "You're my hand of the queen in all but name, you can rally them. We'll appoint a capable knight to command the fighting, but you must oversee the broader operation. Tyrion, you remain here to manage the capital in my absence." Tyrion blinked. "Your absence?" She stood, trembling with determination. "I'm going. I won't cower behind these walls while Brienne could be fighting for her life, or trapped, or... No. I must do this myself. The Vale is our ally, and I am queen. If I show no resolve, how can I expect others to fight?" A hush. Davos and Tyrion exchanged worried glances. They knew the risk, yet they also saw the steely resolve on her face. Tyrion ventured carefully, "Your Grace, it's dangerous in the extreme. With Bran absent, you'll be exposed to these dark forces. If you fall, the realm Sansa lifted her chin. "If I hide, the realm sees a coward. More importantly, I cannot ask men to risk their lives without being willing to do the same. We've learned by now that moral authority matters in these times. I'll not lose more good people because they think I do not care enough to stand with them." She turned to Davos. "Gather the men, rations, and warm gear. We ride as soon as possible. I'll take a personal guard, plus the 1,000 we prepared. Martin, you must rest, but if you can guide us through the passes, that would be invaluable." Martin nodded weakly. I'll try. But be careful. The cult's magic, it's not like anything I've seen since the White Walkers." Sansa closed her eyes briefly, steeling herself. "We will be careful." Then, remembering something crucial, she looked to Tyrion. Send a raven to each place we suspect Bran might be. Tell him what's happening. If he can join us or help us in any way, we need him now. Tyrion inclined his head. I'll send multiple ravens at once. If he's within reach of any maester's roost, he'll know. So, amid the swirl of urgent preparations, Sansa made ready to march out with a newly assembled force. She wore a lighter set of armor that had been fashioned in the North style, dark metal with subtle engravings of dire wolves at the shoulders over layers of thick padding. Her cloak was the warmest she owned, pure white fur shot through with streaks of gray. She carried no sword, for she was no trained fighter, but she kept a short dagger at her hip. More than once, she told herself if Arya were here, she'd be the one riding out to fight. But Arya was far to the west, exploring unknown seas. And Sansa was queen. That meant she must protect her people however she could. Davos, true to his word, took command of the logistical side, ensuring wagons were loaded with enough supplies to last the grueling winter trek. A newly promoted knight named Ser Byronsand, one of Gendry's best men, was placed in charge of martial tactics. They had archers, foot soldiers, cavalry, and siege engineers who carried rope and grappling hooks in case the mountains required them. Sansa insisted they not forget to bring medical supplies, for if the cult enthralled large numbers of innocents, they might have to care for many wounded or free them from captivity. By midday, the mustering in the courtyard was complete. Nearly 1,000 men stood in ranks, breath steaming, horses stamping. Snow drifted from the leaden sky. Sansa, mounted on a calm gray mare, surveyed them with a slow sweep of her gaze. Her heart pounded, but she kept her face composed. She reminded herself that once, she had been a scared girl at King's Landing, tormented by Joffrey, forced to say words she did not believe. Now she was the Wolf Queen. She had faced the long night, endured tyranny under Ramsay and Cersei, watched Daenerys' madness burn the city, and survived. That, she hoped, would see her through once more. Tyrion approached to bid farewell. He wore a thick cloak but carried no arms. "Safe travels, your grace," he said quietly, and there was genuine concern in his mismatched eyes. "If the cult truly is stronger than the last, remember that living to fight another day can be a virtue." She gave him a faint smile. "I'll do my best, Lord Tyrion. Take care of the city while I'm gone. Keep forging those alliances and trade deals. We'll need them if we're to recover from whatever we face." He bowed. "I shall." Then, with a flicker of old mischief, he added, "And if you happen to see a swirl symbol anywhere, do me a favor and smash it." Sansa almost laughed, despite the tension coiling in her chest. She nodded, then spurred her horse forward, leading the column out through the King's Gate. Citizens lined the streets to watch, many shivering in the cold. Some called out blessings or half-hearted cheers. Others merely stared, hollow-eyed. An old woman knelt and crossed herself in the tradition of the Seven. Sansa tried to look each face in the eye, as though silently promising she would do her best to protect them. Once outside the gates, the army proceeded along the main road, slush spraying from the horses' hooves, puffs of breath curling around helmets. Davos rode near the front, conferring with Ser Byron, while Sansa took a place a short distance behind them, flanked by half a dozen of her Queen's Guard. The standard-bearers carried banners, the dire wolf of House Stark, and a simpler banner representing the newly reformed Crownlands. The men chattered about the swirling cult, speculating on how to fight magic. Some wore talismans or charms they believed might ward off evil. Sansa said nothing, but she could not fault them for wanting every advantage. Fear was a natural response. They pushed north and east, crossing the King's Road, turning onto narrower byways that led toward the Vale. Frozen streams glinted beneath midday sun. Villages appeared here and there, many half-empty or shuttered for winter. Occasionally, Sansa would speak with the locals, gleaning scraps of rumor. Some had heard of an eerie sect in the mountains. Others had spotted travelers heading east, vanishing into the hills. Still others claimed no knowledge at all, only that the nights felt colder than usual, as though something evil breathed across the land. Each night, the army camped in makeshift fashion, pitching tents in the snow. Bonfires crackled, sending sparks whirling into the black sky. Sansa spent the evenings in a larger command tent with Davos and Ser Byron, reviewing maps. The Vale's topography was notoriously tricky, a labyrinth of peaks and passes. The main route was to ascend to the Bloody Gate, then proceed to the Eyrie, but Brienne's expedition had veered off that path to track the cult's hideouts. It took over a week of hard travel to near the base of the mountains. By then, the men were tired, cold, and anxious. The temperature had dropped further, forcing them to ration firewood. On the last leg of the march, they came upon a cluster of refugees fleeing from the foothills, a ragged band of peasants and wounded knights. They recognized the Stormland's sigil among the battered men and hailed them. Sansa ordered that these survivors be brought into camp at once to warm themselves and share information. In the flickering light of a campfire, Sansa crouched to speak to them. The knights were sallow-faced, hands shaking not only from cold but from shock. One of them, a lanky man with a bandaged arm, introduced himself as Ser Colin Penrose. He breathed, "Your Grace, you should turn back. The Vale's passes are swarming with cultists. They ambush travelers, enthrall them, or butcher them. Lord Robin's knights tried to hold the Bloody Gate, but a portion of them betrayed their own. It's a horror I can barely describe." Sansa's pulse thundered. "Do you know what became of Ser Brienne of Tarth?" Ser Colin's gaze flickered. She was last seen heading deeper into the mountains, chasing rumors that the Prophet was near a place called the Weeping Cavern. We were part of her forward scouts, but we got cut off. We lost many. I fear," he trailed off, shaking his head. Sansa pressed. "But you do not know for certain that she's dead?" He shook his head. "No. Only that we couldn't reach her. The cult's magic is real, my queen. I saw a fellow knight scream as his sword arm froze solid, then shattered. Another was forced to his knees by some invisible force and had the swirl symbol carved into his flesh. I fled. I'm not proud, but the fear was overwhelming." His voice cracked. "Forgive me. I couldn't stay." Sansa's throat tightened with emotion. She placed a hand gently on his shoulder. "You survived. That is all. You can help us now by telling us everything you know. We've brought 1,000 men to end this threat." He stared at her in weary disbelief. 1,000 men might not be enough, Your Grace." A hush settled. Davos cleared his throat, standing just behind Sansa. "It'll have to be. We'll not abandon the Vale to this nightmare. Show us on our map where you last saw Brienne. Where's this prophet's stronghold?" Ser Colin nodded, swallowing. He and the other survivors spent the next hour describing what they knew. It was patchy intelligence at best, but it gave Sansa's commanders a rough sense of direction. The Weeping Caverns lay northeast of the Bloody Gate, in a region of treacherous cliffs and hidden gorges. Once it might have sheltered outlaws or wild beasts. Now it housed something far worse. The Swirl cult, rumored to be hundreds strong, used it as a base for vile rituals. Hostages or enthralled recruits were kept inside tunnels. The prophet, said to be an emaciated figure with eyes like polished ice, rarely emerged, but when he did, knights froze in their tracks, overtaken by terror. More swirling symbols had been found carved into stone, reminiscent of the patterns once left by the White Walkers in the far north. The next morning, Sansa convened her war council. A fierce wind rattled the canvas of her command tent. Snow had fallen heavily in the night, and men were already trudging about to clear paths. Inside, her breath formed soft puffs as she, Davos, Ser Byron, and a handful of knights studied a roughly sketched map by lamplight. Ser Colin and Martin, still recovering from his own wounds, stood by to advise. "The Weeping Caverns are said to be here." Ser Colin pointed to a crooked ridge line. "It's high enough that the paths are narrow, one side dropping off into a gorge. Hard to bring a large force up without being seen. They'll have watchers posted. If we try to march up in full formation, we'll be ambushed by archers or whatever magic they use." Sansa considered. "Then we might need to split our forces. One column attempts the direct route, drawing their attention, while another scales the slopes from a different angle. Perhaps we can surround them." Ser Byron furrowed his brow. "That region is riddled with smaller caves and crevices. We risk men getting lost or sliding off the cliffs, but a well-trained group of climbers might succeed in flanking them. We do have some engineers with ropes and grapnels." Davos nodded, tapping the map. "We can't let them funnel us into a single narrow path. We know how deadly that can be. If we can take the high ground above the caverns, we might be able to block their escape or at least harry them with arrow fire." "Agreed," Sansa said. "But first, we must confirm Brienne's location. If she and any of her men are still alive, we need to find and rescue them before launching a full assault, unless a simultaneous strike is our only chance." Martin cleared his throat, his voice shaking slightly. "Ser Brienne might be in the lower tunnels. When I left, she was searching for a path that led beneath the main cavern, hoping to strike the prophet from below. If that's still her plan, she might be pinned down somewhere in the labyrinth. The cult's enthralled minions patrol it." Sansa felt the old fear coiling in her gut. She remembered how, as a child, she had found courage only in stories of gallant knights. Brienne was the living embodiment of that gallantry. The thought of her trapped in a labyrinth of dark magic was almost unbearable. But she forced herself to remain calm. "All right," she said softly. "We'll plan an assault that accounts for a possible rescue operation. Ser Byron, I want your best climbers to take a group up the slopes, aiming to secure vantage points above the cave entrance. Ser Colin, you'll guide them. Davos, you'll coordinate the main body to approach the standard route, ready to draw attention." "I'll ride with the main body." Davos's expression tightened. "My queen, if you're in the main body, you could be directly in harm's way. The prophet might attempt to enthrall or freeze you." "I know the risk," Sansa said firmly. "But I must be present. The men will fight more bravely if I stand with them, and I won't hide behind the lines. If we are to succeed, we need every advantage of morale. My being there might lend courage." She looked around the tent, meeting each man's eyes. "This cult has thrived on fear and darkness. Let them see that we do not bow to either." A resolute hush fell, then each man nodded. They began shaping the details of the plan: timing, signals, fallback positions, scouting routes for the climbers. Within hours, the army was on the move once again, leaving behind a small rear guard to protect the wounded. They pressed into the Vale's foothills, winding up steep trails. The snow grew heavier, swirling about them in gusts that stung the skin. The men's cloaks snapped like banners in the wind. As they neared the infamous Bloody Gate, they found it in disarray. The old fortifications, once manned by proud knights of the Vale, lay scorched and partially collapsed. A few bodies were frozen in the drifts, half covered by fresh snow. Sansa dismounted, trembling, to survey the scene. Davos walked beside her, grim-faced. "Gods," he muttered, kneeling by a corpse that wore a Vale surcoat. "No sign of a large battle, but definitely a skirmish. It looks as though some traitors opened the gate from within." Sansa's breath caught as she spotted a swirl carved into the stone archway. She forced herself to touch it, half expecting a jolt of cold magic. It was only stone, but the symbol was fresh, etched with harsh lines. She withdrew her hand, wishing she could bury it under 1,000 layers of mortar. "They're letting us know they were here," she said softly. "Or perhaps they're marking territory, like the White Walkers did." Davos rose. "Let's not linger. We have to push on." She gave a terse nod, returning to her horse. The army continued onward, morale shaken by the sight of the Bloody Gate's defilement. They climbed higher, the temperature dropping. Mountain winds whipped at them, and the path narrowed in places, forcing them into single-file columns. Spotters rode ahead, scanning the cliffs for ambush. More than once, they spotted figures moving along the heights, but when they tried to approach, those shapes disappeared behind ridges. After 2 days of careful progress, they established a forward camp in a sheltered ravine. Ser Byron led a group of climbers off under cover of darkness, carrying ropes, grapnels, and enough supplies for a stealth approach along the western slopes. Sansa remained with Davos, coordinating the main force that would attempt a frontal approach at dawn. That night, Sansa slept fitfully in a cramped tent. She dreamt of swirling symbols etched on the inside of her eyelids, dreamt of an endless winter that carried moaning voices. She recalled the White Walkers' advance on Winterfell years ago and how they had nearly extinguished all life. Sweat coated her brow despite the freezing air. She jolted awake near dawn, heart hammering. Trying to steady herself, she rose and dressed in her armor. Outside, the pale light of morning revealed swirling snow and rock faces looming overhead. Davos greeted her at once, speaking in low tones. The climbers signaled with a shuttered lantern from the ridge an hour past. "They're in position, or so it seems. Are we ready?" Sansa drew a breath that stung her lungs. "Yes, let's begin." They formed ranks, pushing higher toward the Weeping Caverns. The narrow road twisted along the side of a steep drop, the gorge below lost in shadows. Sansa rode near the front with Davos and a handful of knights while a long column followed. Scouts ranged ahead. The tension in the air was palpable, as though even the wind held its breath. Then the first arrows whistled down from above. The cult sentries had spotted them. 3 soldiers cried out, struck by arrows from the ridges. Men raised shields, forming a makeshift barrier. Shouts echoed off the cliffs. Sansa's mare snorted in fear, but she kept the reins tight. "Shields up," Davos barked, urging the men to press forward. They advanced in a huddled formation, seeking what little cover they could against the cliff face. Return arrows flew upward, but the archers above had the advantage of height. Suddenly, a shrill cry echoed, and half a dozen ragged figures scrambled onto a ledge overhead, brandishing swords and spears. They wore odd scraps of armor, some displaying swirl tattoos on their exposed arms. Sansa saw one figure stoop and hurl a clay pot downward. It smashed near the rear ranks, spraying a cold, glimmering substance. A soldier it touched screamed, collapsing with frost spreading across his armor. An unnatural chill emanated from the splatter, as though the pot had contained liquid ice. "Forward!" Davos urged, though the men wavered. "We can't stand here in the open." At that moment, a horn blast came from the heights on the other side. Sansa glimpsed movement, Ser Byron's climbers, possibly, launching their diversion. The cult archers shifted focus, some turning to face the new threat. Sensing their window, Sansa and Davos pushed the main column forward, surging up the trail at a quicker pace. Some of the enthralled cultists ran to intercept them, but the Queen's knights met them in brutal hand-to-hand combat. Sansa felt utterly exposed. She was not a warrior like Brienne or Arya, but she forced herself to remain in the thick of it, shielded by her guard. She saw enthralled men with vacant eyes lunge at the front ranks, howling in a language she did not understand. One tried to seize her stirrup, only to be cut down by a Queensguard sword. The swirl on the man's forehead gleamed with fresh blood. She shuddered, urging her mare onward. They forced a path to a wider shelf of rock that overlooked a yawning cave entrance. Here, the mountaineers had carved out a steep depression in the stone, forming natural channels for water to drip, hence the name Weeping Caverns. Sansa could see rivulets of ice glistening on the walls. The entrance loomed like a great maw in the mountainside. More cultists poured out, brandishing weapons, shrieking. At the same time, Ser Byron's force descended from the ridge overhead, firing arrows down into the cult's flank. Screams rang out. A pitched battle ensued on the ledge leading to the cave, men slipping on ice, metal clashing. The cultists had fewer numbers than Sansa's main force, but they fought with eerie fervor as though unafraid of death. Some had faces contorted with fanatic glee, others stared blankly as if enthralled. Sansa kept back as best she could, letting her knights and Davos orchestrate the front lines, but she felt the chaos pressing in. At one point, two cultists managed to slip behind the line of spearmen and rush her. Her heart froze in terror. She fumbled for her dagger. One cultist, face gaunt, swirl carved on his chest, lunged with a rusted sword. Before he could strike, a Queensguard soldier slammed him aside with a shield bash, then rammed a sword into his gut. The other cultist flailed, only to meet a spear thrust from a second guard. They collapsed at Sansa's horse's hooves, spattering blood. Gritting her teeth, Sansa forced herself not to flinch. She cast her gaze around, searching for any sign of Brienne or Podrick, any clue in the swirl-laden chaos. The cult was retreating into the cave entrance now, some running deeper into the darkness. The swirl patterns painted on the rocks glowed faintly in the half-light, as if mocking them. Davos, panting, approached. "They're pulling back," he said. "We can't let them barricade themselves inside. We must press on, but watch for traps." Sansa swallowed hard. "Agreed. Spread out. Secure the entrance. Then we'll form smaller squads to venture in. We can't send everyone blindly." She raised her voice to address the nearest ranks, "Advance with caution. Watch for the enthralled. Spare them if you can, but do not risk your own lives." The men began advancing into the mouth of the Weeping Caverns, torches in hand. Sansa dismounted, preferring not to lead her mare into unknown tunnels. She gave the horse to a squire. Then, sword at his belt, Davos guided her forward, flanked by guards. Ser Byron regrouped with them, breath ragged from the climb and the fight. He reported that his archers had neutralized some of the cult's perimeter watchers. They had not yet seen Brienne. Inside, the cavern walls were slick with moisture. Icicles hung from the ceiling, drip-drip echoing in the gloom. Torch flames sputtered in the damp air. The floors were uneven, forming natural steps. Every so often, the swirling cult symbols appeared, painted in what looked like dried blood or perhaps some other dark substance. The deeper they went, the stronger the stench of rot became, mingled with an undercurrent of something sweet and sickly. Small skirmishes flared in side passages. Cult members, hidden in nooks, jumped out with shrieks, only to be cut down by the larger force. Sansa's men advanced methodically, using shield walls in the narrower corridors. Yet the labyrinth twisted and branched at every turn, and soon the main body was forced to split into search parties. Sansa remained with Davos, Ser Byron, and a group of about 20 knights. They pressed down a sloping tunnel that echoed with distant chanting. Torchlight revealed the stones slick with a film of algae or moss. The air turned colder, each breath a puff of vapor. She tried to ignore the metallic tang of old blood. The chanting grew louder. At last, the tunnel opened into a vast chamber, its walls dripping with water that tinkled into a shallow black pool at the center. On a stone ledge beyond the pool, a cluster of robed figures stood in formation around an altar, another swirl symbol carved into its surface. Their chanting was a low hum that reverberated in Sansa's chest. One figure stood taller, wearing tattered furs and a crude crown of ice. The face was drawn, almost skeletal, with eyes that gleamed pale blue in the torchlight. Sansa's mouth went dry as she realized. That must be the prophet. He lifted his arms, and the swirling chant crescendoed. "Move!" Davos hissed. The knights rushed forward, weapons at the ready. The robed figures whirled, some producing knives or clubs. The prophet himself made no move to flee. Instead, his lips twisted in a grim smile. Then his eyes blazed with unnatural light. A wave of frigid air swept across the chamber. The men stumbled. One knight dropped his torch, which hissed as it met the water. Sansa felt her limbs stiffen as though an invisible cold pressed on her. Fear spiked. She managed to keep moving, but some of her knights cried out, dropping to their knees, eyes bulging in terror or pain. The robed cultists swarmed in with hisses and shrieks. Ser Byron roared, hacking down one cultist, while Davos forced himself forward, swinging his short sword. Sansa's heart hammered as she witnessed the clash. She ducked behind a cluster of knights, holding her dagger with trembling fingers, uncertain how to fight magic. The prophet's laughter reverberated across the cavern, a sound both triumphant and hollow. Suddenly, a figure emerged from a side tunnel, sword flashing. "Sansa!" a voice shouted. Sansa's heart nearly stopped. It was Podrick Payne, breathing hard, his face streaked with grime. Relief and joy welled in her. "Pod!" she cried. "Where is Brienne?" Podrick quickly impaled a cultist who tried to tackle him. She's alive. She's deeper in fighting the main group. We got separated. They took prisoners, including some of her knights. She told me to find help." Sansa glanced at the altar, where the prophet raised both hands, beckoning with long fingers. The swirl symbol glowed faintly with that unnatural light. The robed figures still chanted. If the prophet completed whatever spell he was weaving, they might all be lost. She ground her teeth. "We'll help Brienne, but first we must handle that fiend." Podrick nodded, falling in beside them. Together with Davos, Ser Byron, and the knights still standing, they advanced through the knee-deep black water, ignoring the frigid shock. The robed cultists threw themselves into the fray with manic strength, and the chamber filled with the clang of steel and the wails of the wounded. The prophet spat an incantation in a guttural tongue. Another wave of cold blasted across the water. Ice crackled at the edges, and two knights froze mid-step, as if encased in invisible frost. Davos stumbled but fought his way forward. Ser Byron hurled his spear. It passed mere inches from the prophet's face, clattering on the stone behind. Sansa, though terrified, recalled the stories of how Arya had dispatched the Night King with a single well-timed strike. She thought, if this so-called prophet is mortal, we might kill him as well. She advanced, her dagger seeming laughably small, but she had no illusions that she herself could deliver the blow. Instead, she clutched a torch, lighting it from a flickering sconce on the wall. Fire might hamper the icy magic, or so she hoped. "Push him back!" she shouted. At that moment, from the same side tunnel Podrick had emerged, came a new group of cultists dragging hostages. Among them was Brienne of Tarth herself, bloodied but alive, wrists bound in front. Her armor was dented, her hair matted with grime, yet her eyes were fierce. "No!" she cried, struggling to break free. Two enthralled knights held her at spear point. Another 5 or 6 captives lurked behind, including Vale Lords and Stormlanders, all bound and battered. Sansa's heart clenched. "Brienne!" she shouted. She tried to rush forward, but a cultist intercepted her, swinging a club. The blow glanced off a knight's shield. Davos lunged to help, slicing the man across the ribs. Sansa nearly tripped, water sloshing. Ahead, the enthralled knights shoved Brienne to her knees. The prophet looked on with a twisted smile, as though savoring the moment. His voice, amplified by magic, boomed across the chamber. "Kneel, child of the wolves. Kneel or watch your champion die." Sansa's breath came in ragged gasps. She saw the glint of a spear pressed to Brienne's throat. Brienne glared defiantly, refusing to beg. The swirling chant resumed among the robed figures, redoubling the oppressive cold in the air. "Stay back," the prophet snarled at Sansa. "Bow before the swirl, and I shall spare a handful of you. Resist, and I freeze your champion piece by piece." Davos and Ser Byron exchanged alarmed glances. They were close enough to attempt a rescue, but not without risking Brienne's immediate death. The enthralled knights seemed enthralled indeed, eyes blank. The swirl symbol marred their armor. Sansa realized the prophet might command them to kill Brienne with a single thought. Her mind raced. She could not let that happen. Yet to surrender was unthinkable. This creature would only enthrall them all or slaughter them as a sacrifice to the old power. Her chest tightened. She thought of how Arya had fooled the Night King with cunning. She thought of how the White Walkers had a singular weakness to dragoglass or Valyrian steel, but they had none of that here, only normal steel and meager torches. She thought, too, of how illusions could be used against the overconfident. "We must distract him," she whispered to Davos. "If I pretend to yield, perhaps you can free Brienne." Davos's eyes widened. "Your Grace, it's risky. He might enthrall you." Sansa steeled herself. "Then let's hope my mind is strong enough. We have no choice." Taking a shaking breath, she pushed forward, ignoring the swirling water. She raised her voice. "Stop. Please, don't harm her. I yield." A hush rippled across the chamber. The cult's chanting dimmed. The prophet turned his pale eyes upon her, lips twisting into a vicious grin. "Then kneel," he commanded. "Kneel before the swirl. Renounce your false claims to the throne, pledge yourself to the darkness beyond the wall." Sansa's pulse roared in her ears. She edged closer, hands outstretched, letting the torch bob low as though she considered dropping it. Behind her, Davos and Ser Byron parted slightly, trying to circle around. She knelt on the slimy stone, wincing as water soaked into her cloak. "I will do as you say," she forced out. "Only spare my friend." The prophet cackled, stepping closer to her. His robe parted, revealing a gaunt chest on which a swirl brand glowed faintly. "Weak," he hissed. "A queen who yields is no queen at all." He raised one claw-like hand toward Sansa, and she felt a wave of cold pressing on her mind, seeking to enthrall her. She clenched her jaw, focusing on every ounce of stark resilience, refusing to let the chill claim her. She pictured Winterfell's godwood, the warmth of the hearth, the memory of her family's love. She saw an opening. Davos was creeping up behind one of the enthralled knights, blade at the ready. Brienne, sensing something, tensed. The prophet's attention was momentarily fixed on Sansa. She seized that moment, hurling the torch forward. The flame swept up near the prophet's face, forcing him to recoil. In that same heartbeat, Davos lunged, dispatching one enthralled knight with a swift stroke. Ser Byron and two other knights stormed in from the side, clashing with the others who guarded Brienne. Podrick rushed forward as well. The melee exploded anew. Water splashed. The robed cultists shrieked. The prophet roared in anger, lashing out with icy magic that froze the torch midair, extinguishing it. Then he swung his hand in a vicious arc, sending a wave of frost. Sansa threw herself sideways, nearly slipping, to avoid the brunt of it. She saw Ser Byron battered by the cold blast, half his face turning blue with frostbite. But he still managed to drive his sword into the chest of an enthralled guard. Davos and Podrick were hacking at the remaining cultists. Meanwhile, Brienne, freed for an instant from direct watch, heaved upward, snapping her bonds with brute strength. One enthralled knight tried to stab her, but she ducked aside, using the slack chain from her manacles to yank the spear away. Then she slammed a fist into his face, the blow echoing across the chamber. "Now free," Brienne roared, "for the queen." She grabbed a dropped sword from the ground, turned on the prophet and slashed. The prophet whirled, summoning a swirl of frosty air that deflected her blow. The sound of metal on ice rang out. Fury twisted his gaunt features. He tried to unleash another wave of cold, but Brienne pressed forward relentlessly. Sansa watched in awe and terror as the knight hammered at the prophet's defenses. Each strike chipped away at the swirling barrier of ice, the creature letting out ragged, inhuman hisses. Then, to everyone's shock, the swirl brand on the prophet's chest flared bright, emitting a wave of power that threw Brienne back several paces. She hit the ground hard, sword skittering away. The prophet advanced, preparing a final blow. But Sansa, fueled by desperation, snatched up a fallen spear. She was no warrior, but she recalled every lesson from the countless battles she had witnessed. With a cry, she hurled the spear, aiming for the swirl brand. Perhaps fortune guided her aim. The spear struck the prophet's chest with a wet thud, piercing the swirling brand. A howl of agony tore from his throat. The swirling aura flickered, then shattered like cracking ice. Brienne, seizing her chance, sprang up and grabbed her discarded sword. With a two-handed slash, she severed the prophet's head. The gaunt body collapsed into the water, blackish blood spreading. The swirling brand glowed once, then faded into dull flesh. At once, the robed cultists still alive let out moans or shrieks. Some dropped their weapons, staggering as though freed from a trance. Others fled deeper into the caverns. The enthralled knights collapsed, blinking in confusion. The entire chamber felt as though a massive pressure had lifted. The swirl's power was broken, at least for now. A stunned hush took hold. Sansa, chest heaving, lowered her trembling arms. Brienne, battered and bleeding, stood over the prophet's corpse, sword in hand, water dripping from her dented armor. Davos, Podrick, and the remaining knights secured the chamber, binding any cultists who surrendered. The black pool beneath the altar stilled. Panting, Sansa struggled to her feet. She gingerly approached Brienne, who sank to one knee in exhaustion. "You're alive," Sansa whispered, tears prickling her eyes. Brienne raised her head. "I promised I'd protect you," she rasped, voice rough. "I'm sorry it took so long to break free." Sansa shook her head fiercely. "You have nothing to apologize for. You saved us." She cast a glance at the prophet's corpse. "We did it. The swirl is broken. The cult is, I hope, undone." Brienne's gaze traveled across the ruined altar, the swirl symbol sundered by the spear's strike. She grimaced. "It's the second time we've seen such a cult. I fear it won't be the last." Sansa let the dread wash through her. So many had died, so many had been enthralled. Yet they had won. The Weeping Caverns were theirs. Now they would tend to the wounded, round up any cult remnants. She prayed that this decisive blow would break the prophet's hold on the veil. In the hours that followed, chaos reigned in the aftermath. They found survivors in side chambers, some Vale Knights, some peasants. Others were beyond saving, their minds shattered or their bodies mutilated in dark rites. Brienne insisted on searching every passage for any who might yet live. Sansa lent what aid she could, though she was no maester. By the time they emerged from the caverns, half-frozen and exhausted, the men outside cheered weakly at the news. The prophet was dead, the cult leadership scattered. They camped on a ledge just beyond the entrance, building fires to warm themselves, stacking the bodies of the dead for burning. Brienne collapsed into a fitful sleep, her injuries tended by a maester. Sansa sat by the largest fire, staring into the flames with hollow eyes. Davos joined her after giving orders to the men. Gently he touched her arm. "We did it. Your plan worked." She closed her eyes. "We won this battle. But how many more are out there? The swirl, it keeps appearing. In the Vale, beyond the wall. Possibly near Cracklaw Point. The old magic is stirring. Without Bran's guidance, we're merely reacting. How do we stop it from happening again?" Davos sat heavily. "I don't know, my queen. We can only do our best. Perhaps when Bran returns, he'll have answers." Sansa nodded slowly. "Perhaps." She gazed at the swirl symbol carved into her memory, recalling how many had died under its sign. "I just hope we can hold the realm together until then." They passed the night in the cold, uneasy, surrounded by the living and the dead, battered by the wind. In the morning, they would begin the journey back, carrying Brienne and the freed prisoners, collecting the scattered men, and hopefully restoring order to the Vale. But Sansa knew deep down that their victory was not the final chapter, only another step in a long struggle against a power that refused to die. Days later, the battered army returned to the foothills where Lord Robin Arryn and his remaining knights greeted them with trembling relief. The news spread fast that the Wolf Queen herself had helped slay the prophet and the swirl cult in the mountains was broken. The Vale, for the moment, was safe again. Yet the cost was steep. Hundreds of her men and Brienne's original expedition had perished, some enthralled, some simply cut down. When Sansa made the grim tally, she felt the weight of each life pressing upon her conscience. Brienne, recovering from her wounds, insisted on walking part of the way back, refusing to show weakness. Her face was pale, but her spirit burned fiercely. Sansa walked beside her when she could, occasionally letting Brienne lean on her arm if she stumbled. The Knight of Tarth apologized repeatedly for failing to keep the cult contained from the start, but Sansa would hear none of it. "You kept fighting under impossible odds," Sansa said firmly. "You saved countless lives, mine included. Don't blame yourself." They parted ways with the Vale's knights near the Eyrie, where a humbled Lord Robin swore fresh oaths of loyalty and gratitude. He admitted that pockets of the cult might still exist, but with their prophet gone, they would pose far less threat. Sansa promised to send any additional aid if needed. Then began the long trek back to the Crownlands, winter's grip tight on the roads. Throughout the journey, the question of the swirl haunted her. She and Brienne spoke of it late at night in hushed voices, recalling how the White Walkers used those symbols, how the children of the forest had once shaped them. "Bran told me that evil can be passed on like a torch in the night," Brienne said. "Snuffed out in one place, but lit anew in another. We must remain vigilant." Sansa agreed, wishing fervently for Bran's presence. "If only we knew where he was," she murmured. "He might be unraveling some other swirl cult alone, for all we know." Brienne forced a small smile. "If he is, I imagine he's better equipped than us to handle it. He sees more than we do." Sansa nodded and fell silent, gazing at the wintry horizon. When at last they neared King's Landing, the battered columns of soldiers found the city shrouded in white. Snow piled against the walls, though the gates stood open, welcoming the returning victors. Word had preceded them via messenger that the Wolf Queen had slain the prophet, and so throngs of weary townsfolk gathered, offering subdued cheers. Sansa led the procession, her cloak still stained with the blood of battles in the Vale, her face lined with exhaustion. Yet she held her head high, acknowledging the cheers with a faint smile. In the Red Keep's courtyard, Tyrion rushed out to greet them, relief written all over his face. He bowed to Sansa, then to Brienne. "Thank the gods you're both alive," he said. "We feared the worst." Sansa dismounted stiffly. "We lost many, but we ended the threat in the Vale for now." She glanced around. "Any word from Bran? Or from Tormund or Jon in the far north?" Tyrion grimaced. "No direct word, though we did receive an odd message from a maester at Crackclaw Point. It arrived only a day ago. It said your brother had passed through investigating old legends in the bogs. He departed again without saying where he was headed." The maester seemed unsettled by what Bran had told him about swirl marks found along the coastline, but no further details were provided. Sansa sighed, the weight of weariness pressing on her. "So he's still wandering or searching. Very well. And from the far north, no further ravens?" "None," Tyrion said quietly. "But Tormund remains here, waiting for your return. He was quite concerned when we told him you had gone to battle. He'll want to speak with you about the swirling sightings near the frozen shore." Sansa nodded. "I'll speak with him soon." She paused, feeling the chill in her bones, the ache of countless bruises. "But first, let's see to the wounded. Brienne needs proper healing. Our men need rest and hot meals." Tyrion agreed. He coordinated with the maesters, ensuring warm quarters for the injured. Sansa assisted Brienne to her chambers, leaving the night in the care of a skilled healer. Only after seeing that her remaining soldiers were housed and fed did Sansa retire to her own solar, thoroughly spent. She slid out of her armor, letting a handmaiden help with the buckles. The bruises across her shoulders flared with pain. The memory of the prophet's cold magic still gave her shivers. When at last she was alone, she collapsed onto her bed, staring at the dark ceiling. Her mind spun with images of swirl sigils, of gaunt faces, of ice-lace chanting that threatened to consume the realm. She shut her eyes, wishing for a moment of genuine solace, but none came. Instead, she heard the echo of her own voice. How do we stop it from happening again? She did not sleep easily that night. Visions of the White Walkers prowled the edges of her dreams, swirling patterns forming a labyrinth with no exit. She heard Bran's voice in her head. I had to refuse the throne because I must watch for these dangers. She half wondered if things would have been different had he been king. Would the swirl cult have been quashed earlier, or would the realm have fractured in other ways? The question was moot. Morning brought fresh chores and responsibilities. She rose, determined not to let despair seize her. She had a realm to hold together. She bathed, had her wounds tended by a maester, and then dressed in more formal garb to greet Tormund in the Great Hall. Her body ached, but she forced a regal bearing. Tormund greeted her with a relieved grin that quickly faded when he saw her bandaged arm and the tired lines of her face. "7 hells," he muttered. "You fought in the Vale? Is it true you took down some ice wizard?" Sansa managed a small smile at his wildling phrasing. "We called him the Prophet. But yes, he was channeling something akin to White Walker magic. We ended him, though we lost many good men." Tormund nodded gravely. "I'm sorry for that. We've had no White Walkers up north, but signs keep cropping up near the frozen shore. Strange symbols, lights at night. Jon is uneasy. He's sending patrols, but in the deep cold, it's dangerous." He paused. "If you want, I can ride back north and tell him about what happened here. Maybe it'll help him figure out what we're dealing with." Sansa sank onto the dais steps, gesturing for Tormund to sit as well. The great hall was otherwise empty at this early hour. "Yes," she said softly. "Tell Jon everything. Warn him that these swirl cults might form anywhere, that the darkness is opportunistic. If he sees anything that suggests a new prophet or a new focus of magic, we have to know quickly." She exhaled. "I'll dispatch a few men with you to speed your journey." Tormund nodded. I'm heading back soon, anyway. The warm south isn't to my liking for long." She folded her hands in her lap, eyes downcast. "Tell Jon. If he needs help, we'll muster what we can. But the realm is stretched thin. I can't promise thousands. Still, I won't abandon him if things turn dire." Tormund scratched his beard. "He'd never expect you to fight his battles for him. But I think he'd be glad to know you're there, just as you were when you both faced the Night King." Sansa closed her eyes, recalling that dreadful night in Winterfell's crypts, hearing the battle rage above. "We survived that once," she whispered. "We'll do so again if we must." Tormund left 2 days later, accompanied by a small escort. Sansa stood on the ramparts to watch him ride out, feeling a pang of melancholy. It seemed that every path led to confrontation with the swirl. The entire continent felt haunted by that shape, the memory of the long night refusing to be laid to rest. In the weeks that followed, the realm settled back into a precarious calm. Sansa focused on reconstruction efforts in the Crownlands, the Riverlands, and the Vale. She worked closely with Tyrion to manage resources. The Vale's new authorities kept watch for straggling cultists. A few minor skirmishes occurred, but nothing like the Weeping Caverns. The final death toll from that battle weighed on everyone's hearts. Brienne healed slowly, refusing any mention of leaving Sansa's side. She wrote updates in the White Book of the Kingsguard, a tradition she had continued as commander of the Queen's Guard. Sometimes Sansa would join her in the library, reading the newly penned accounts of how the Wolf Queen had braved the Swirl cult. Sansa found no glory in the words, only sadness for the blood spilled. Winter's deep chill lingered. Each day, the city bustled with some semblance of life. Smiths forging nails for rebuilding, bakers feeding the hungry, rumor-mongers peddling stories in the streets. Yet always, a layer of worry clung to the populace, as though they sensed more storms on the horizon. At last, one cold afternoon, a raven arrived with a simple message. "I am returning south. Await me at King's Landing within the fortnight. Bran." Sansa read the note twice, hardly daring to believe it. No details, nothing about what he had found near Crackclaw Point, only that he was coming back. She felt relief flood her. If anyone could shed light on these swirl resurgences, it was Bran. Perhaps he had discovered a means to seal them for good, or at least to contain them better than constant warfare allowed. She summoned Tyrion and Brienne at once, showing them the note. Tyrion tapped the parchment. "No mention of what he's uncovered, but I suspect it's significant. Bran rarely travels without purpose." Brienne, her arm still bandaged but mobile, smiled faintly. "I'm glad. We need him." Sansa exhaled. "Yes, let's prepare a warm welcome, and see to it that the city is as presentable as possible, though the snows persist." In the days that followed, Sansa found herself oddly restless, pacing ramparts or walking the burned-out remnants of old towers that still awaited full repair. She kept an eye on the main gates, as though Bran might appear at any moment. She didn't know how he traveled. By carriage? By horseback? Warging into crows half the way? He was an enigma. Then, one gray morning, the watchers on the walls sounded a horn. A small party approached. A single wagon, accompanied by a handful of armed escorts, plus a cluster of ravens circling overhead as though guiding them. Sansa hurried to the courtyard, accompanied by Brienne, Davos, Tyrion, and a few guards. Sure enough, the wagon arrived, drawn by a pair of stout horses. At the reins sat Podrick Payne, looking weary but determined. Inside the wagon was Bran Stark, seated in his wheeled chair. He appeared thinner than ever, cloaked in dark furs, his gaze distant and haunted. Sansa stepped forward. Podrick hopped down, bowing. "Your Grace," he said quietly. "We're back." Bran, expression unreadable, let his pale eyes sweep across the courtyard. The faintest smile touched his lips. "Hello, Sansa," he said softly. "I've missed you." She rushed to him, forgetting decorum, and embraced him as best she could, mindful of his frail limbs. A wave of relief overcame her, though she sensed an undercurrent of sadness in him. "Bran," she whispered, "thank the gods you're safe." He merely nodded. Behind them, Tyrion cleared his throat, stepping forward. "Welcome back, Lord Bran, or whatever title suits you best these days," he said. "We have much to discuss." Bran's gaze slid to Tyrion, then to Brienne. "I've heard you fought bravely in the Vale," he said, voice resonant with a strange calm. "I'm sorry I couldn't aid you." Brienne shook her head. "You had your own path." Sansa gestured for them to move inside, out of the biting cold. She noticed Podrick and the escort men unloading small chests from the wagon, likely items Bran had collected. Something about the chests radiated an aura of secrecy. She suppressed her curiosity for the moment, leading Bran to the Red Keep's grand hall, which was warmer by virtue of braziers and thick drapes. Once they were settled, the small council joined them, Davos, Tyrion, Brienne, and a few other trusted advisors. Sansa sat next to Bran, her heart pounding with anticipation. She wasted no time. "We've fought 2 swirl cults, one in the Vale, one before that. We've had reports of swirl markings beyond the wall. Darkness is stirring across the land. And you, Bran, have been searching for answers. Tell us what you know. Is there a way to stop this?" Bran's eyes were half-lidded as though he peered inward or backward in time. "Yes," he said softly. "I've been traveling to the old places, sifting through memories in the weirwoods, the ravens, the remnants of magic that linger in the bones of Westeros. I felt the swirl forming in multiple spots. I traced it to a deeper root than just leftover White Walker magic." He paused, voice thick with sorrow. "It goes back to the children of the forest, to the forging of the Night King and beyond. It is the cycle of creation and destruction. That swirl is a gateway, a pattern that calls power from the realm's undercurrents. When men gather around it with blood sacrifices or hatred in their hearts, it grows stronger." Sansa and the others exchanged wary looks. Tyrion leaned forward. "So it's not just random cults. It's a phenomenon that can pop up wherever fear and violence converge, harnessing the swirl shape as a focal point." "Yes," Bran confirmed, "the swirl is a channel for that old power. The White Walkers were the greatest manifestation of it, but even though the Night King was slain, the energy can reform if men feed it with worship, with blood. I saw it stirring in the bogs at Crackclaw Point, where once the children fought the first men. I saw it in the Vale. I saw it beyond the wall. If we do nothing, more prophets or new horrors will arise." Sansa clenched her jaw. "We can't just keep fighting new cults forever. Is there a way to sever that power at its source?" Bran drew a long breath, glancing at the chests Podrick had brought in. "I believe so. But it's perilous. We must find and sanctify the deep places where the children's magic lingers. Each swirl site rests on some older root of the land's magic. If we can perform a ritual at each site, an inversion of the swirl, if you will, we might close the gateway. I found references to it in the Weirwood visions, in old runes left by the children. They themselves once tried to contain their creation, but it was undone by the long night. Now we have another chance." Tyrion's brows rose. "A ritual, performed by whom?" "You, I presume, with your greenseer abilities." Bran nodded. "Yes, but it requires living blood linked to the first men, and we need an anchor in the present. That means the Starks. Sansa, or perhaps Arya if she were here, or any Stark descendant. My blood too, but I can't do it alone. It also requires certain items." He gestured toward the chests. "Dragonglass to carve new symbols that counteract the swirl, fragments of weirwood from the old forest beyond the wall, and an oath spoken in the old tongue." I gathered what I could on my travels. Davos rubbed his beard. You said it's perilous. How so? Bran closed his eyes. This old magic is dangerous to tamper with. It could lash out or enthrall us the way these cults enthrall men. We could succeed or we could tear open a deeper wound. Yet if we don't act, the swirl will keep appearing, fueling more cults, more violence. We must do this systematically at each major site, beyond the wall, in the Vale, at Cracklaw Point, perhaps even in the Riverlands or near Harrenhal, anywhere the old power once took root. We must seal them all. A tense silence stretched. Sansa stared at her brother, trying to fathom the scope of what he proposed. A realm-spanning quest to perform ancient rituals at multiple sites, each as deadly as the Weeping Caverns had been. Winter was deep, resources thin. But the alternative was letting the swirl fester. She felt a flicker of hope that at least they now had a plan that might end the threat once and for all. She took Bran's hand. It felt cold. Then we do it, she said quietly. We gather what we need. We travel to each site with a loyal force to protect us, and we trust your guidance to perform the ritual. I'll come with you. Our family's blood must help seal this. If that's what it takes to save Westeros, so be it. Bran's gaze met hers with gratitude and sadness. It won't be easy, Sansa. But you have the strength. We must start soon. The swirl grows stronger in winter. She nodded, turning to the others. Davos, Tyrion, Brienne, Podrick each wore varied expressions of apprehension. But after all they had faced, after the swirl cult nearly claimed the Vale, none of them could argue for an action. They each gave their assent. Tyrion cleared his throat, always the pragmatist. Logistics will be a nightmare, especially in the dead of winter. But we'll manage. Where do we start? Bran's answer came without hesitation. Beyond the wall. He glanced at Sansa. We must seal the place where the White Walkers were born, near the heart of the old magic. That means traveling to the land of always winter where the Night King was first created. If we can seal that site, it'll weaken every other swirl manifestation. Sansa's stomach fluttered. The land of always winter was a place of grim legend, even further north than most wildlings ventured. But if that was the route, so be it. She steadied herself. Then that's our course. We will gather an expedition, contact Jon and the Free Folk, and set out as soon as we can prepare. Bran lowered his head, something like relief crossing his features. Yes, he said softly. It's time to finish what we began the night the Night King fell. And so the Wolf Queen and the Three-Eyed Raven laid out a plan to save Westeros once more, not by war alone, but by confronting the ancient magic at its very source. Though the swirl threatened to consume the realm in pockets of cult-like fury, they now had the beginnings of a method to close the gateway. Yet the road ahead promised trials beyond measure, an arduous journey through frozen wastelands, braving the memory of the White Walkers. Sansa squared her shoulders, recalling every loss, every sacrifice since the War of the Five Kings. She had never sought power, she had only ever sought to protect those she loved. Now she would protect them from the old nightmares that refused to die. There would be no turning back. The next phase of their story was set to unfold among the ice and the ghosts of the long night, with only a spark of hope to guide them. And yet, in that spark, in the stubborn hearts of the Starks and their allies, lived the promise that Westeros could endure if only they held fast to courage and unity when the cold winds rose.